The man thanked him and said this was his reward, inviting him to come sell more and calling him Scarapirapon. The main character thanked him and thought this was not enough. Cheat-like skills from other dimensions are useful, but he didn't pick a combat skill. And in this world, he's an alchemist who makes and sells various goods and doesn't even dream of traveling. Creating expensive potions is impossible for him because their ingredients come from dangerous places or cost a lot. And the market is already flooded with cheap, easy-to-make products. Newcomers must take on work no one else will do, which takes a lot of time and effort. It has become a habit, and he can't hire help because he doesn't want to show his skills. Buying a servant crossed his mind. If he wasn't mistaken, a magical contract bound the servant to the owner and forced him to keep his master's secrets. Though shy, he saw it as essential. Entering, he met a salesman who greeted him, said he had not seen him before, and asked who he needed, and the visitor replied that he needed someone who could do very delicate work. The merchant offered him an obedient girl, told her to be friendly with Paracelsus, and said she was not attractive, but was a very good, well-trained partner. Looking at the price tag, the main character thought it was not very expensive. The girl said, "Scary men come here, and if they buy her, they will do terrible things to her," and she tearfully begged to be taken away. The main character swallowed nervously, and the merchant assumed the tears would work, so seeing he did not look rich, the merchant would not delay him and let him buy something and go home. Paracelsus then saw a girl in the box, said she did not even have price tags, and the merchant said she was an elf who had been abused for decades or even centuries and had no arms, legs, tongue, eyes, or even eardrums. Elven blood was worth a lot, so the man kept it here, but lately no drop had come from it. It occurred to him that she had no man left to regenerate her. Paracelsus said he would buy her. His plan was to claim the merchant was trying to exploit his weakness. Out loud, he said the girl was badly battered. He said fresh elven entrails were hard to get, then asked if the man could sell her cheaper along with the first girl, and the man asked whether he really was an alchemist. The merchant asked for about 200,000 zeni for both, and the man agreed, though he thought it was expensive and wondered why he had not knocked the price down a little. Out loud, he suggested they sign a contract right away. Servants are bound by a magical contract from a sorcerer's spell, so you cannot avoid trouble from them. Under that contract, the master's orders are absolute, and the servant must protect their own safety only so far as it does not conflict with the first rule. For the first girl, the master must pay her a reward of at least 3% of the profits earned from her service. If she pays the master 800,000 zeni, she gains freedom and the rights of a citizen, and violence is not allowed. Even someone who has fallen to a low status can be honored with citizenship if they work hard. This rule has been enforced for 100 years. He does not know how the barbarians in neighboring countries do it. Paracelsus asked the elf about the contract terms, and he replied there were only 2 points: to follow the master's orders and to look after her own safety, and there was no individual contract for her. The merchant declared the deal done, and said he was transferring ownership of the 2 servants, then asked for the contract, while the protagonist began shouting that it was hot, and the merchant told him not to move. The seller said he was now a full-fledged man. When Paracelsus asked what would happen if she broke the contract, the seller replied that the contract acted like hypnosis, and that applied to the man himself as well. The merchant said he wanted the money within a week. The check seemed cursed, and each day of delay would make him feel worse and worse. The latter thought he could not get used to checks. After a while, Paracelsus and the girls left the room. The servant asked if he really had magic, and he said it was something like that. He realized it wasn't really magic. It came from using the universe's skill recipes, and if he followed a recipe, success was guaranteed. Once completed, the recipes disappear. He read the recipe, said it was simple, asked Nora to buy some ingredients while he bought the first half, and they would meet in the square. The girl said she couldn't read, so the main character said they would go with her. Nora asked to carry his burden. After a while, they arrived at his house. The girl introduced herself again, promised to do her best for him, and said that if he needed anything, he only had to ask. He introduced himself to her as well. With little time left, he suggested they start immediately using the simplest combination and prepare a mana potion that works well on elves. Put healing herbs and spirit powder in a frying pan, add oil, and fry until the color changes. The girl said it reminded her of cooking, and he agreed. Pour water into the pot, add the result of the first point and the idea of the estuary, and when it boils, it is ready. According to him, elf bodies are more spiritual than human bodies, and in her current state she is unlikely to be able to take anything inside. Nora asked if he really planned to cut her up after she recovered. She offered to help because she had done something similar with a cow. He replied that he wanted to restore her body and would not cut her up. The girl asked why he was doing it, and whether it was because elves were so rare, and he said he thought that was the reason. The potion was ready, and the elf needed to be examined. When the protagonist asked if she knew the girl's name, she said she knew nothing, and that the merchant had called her nameless. Paracelsus turned to the elf and said he would examine her, starting at the top. The inside of the ear was riddled with old wounds, and the eardrum was so badly damaged it could not recover. The skin was in poor condition from long exposure to unsanitary conditions, worse than he expected. So he turned to Nora and asked her to examine the lower part. Obeying his order, she examined it and said everything was fine, and the place had been treated with care. The main character said everything was fine, and the water would not boil, so he asked the girl to fetch water from the garden well, and she agreed. Paracelsus decided to go himself and asked her to stay and watch the elf, promising to call when the water boiled. But the girl called him back and said she would do everything herself. After a while, the bath was ready. Nora said there was probably enough salt. He said the temperature was just right and let a drop fall into his eye to test it. It did not sting. After that, the man said they were bathing her, and Nora said the medicine was supposed to be taken orally. But he replied that if you suddenly put something in her stomach she has not had for a long time, she would vomit. The medicine had to be absorbed gradually, with her whole body immersed at once. The elf felt the water touch her body and began to move. Paracelsus told her not to be afraid, that she was only going to take a bath. The protagonist thought that if the medicine was absorbed, the bath's magical energy would gradually fade, and he walked to the tama flower and plucked a petal. He stepped to the bathtub and lowered the flower into it. The petals absorb mana, he explained. They turn dark blue when filled with mana. Nora said his magic was amazing. The main character said when the flower changed color, she should take the potion and pour it into the bath. Then the petal actually turned white, and everyone was surprised it happened so quickly. Paracelsus thought he had not poured enough, since that portion would have been enough for a person for a day. The petal turned blue again, then immediately went white. He said they were probably mocking him. The protagonist said she must have been very hungry. He decided to pour out the whole bottle of potion and said he would go look for another bottle. Nora called to him, praised his treatment methods, invited him to look, and pointed out that the elf's hair was glowing. The girl asked why they glowed. The main character explained it was more than the glow. From a distance, the body looks a little dim. Taking the elf's hand gives no feeling. Her body is mostly not flesh, but something else. Nora asked him if he also felt dizzy when he touched her. She asked whether it was the size of the elf's astral body. Paracelsus thought she was listening and said aloud that he had seen ghosts. That was different. Astral bodies have no fixed shape. Wizards call the prime matter mana, and because there were so many wizards, the name became common. The primary elements are fire, air, water, earth, astral bodies, physical bodies, and metals. They are the material of everything. Magicians work with them to produce miracles called magic, and alchemists use them to create various substances. Some believe the physical body contains the astral body, which contains the soul, and that primordial elements could replace the astral body. Could this be possible? The protagonist said this was what was needed, though he did not fully understand it, but it could work. It seemed they could restore her body. Each body has its own characteristics, so no matter how carefully its limbs are made, if they differ even slightly, they will not take root and will rot, and the primordial matter will not be considered a foreign object. He believes that a hand made from the primordial matter would most likely fit like a real one. All that remains is to get enough of it. In the end, he said nothing would come of it. Primary matter seeks to take physical form. Once it becomes matter, no one can extract it. People only use the tiny imperfections left in the air and in substance that has not yet formed into matter. Holding a vial, he showed Nora the primordial matter he'd collected over the past year. For now, they were going to restore her powers, then move her to the bed. Sometime later, the protagonist was in the library. Nora called to him and asked what he was doing. He said he was looking for information about elves. She said she had dried the girl and that she was sleeping now. Paracelsus said he would find it hard without the girl and then thanked her. And at that moment, Nora suddenly shuddered and fell to her knees, causing the main character to worry about her. The girl said everything was fine, that it was just the power of this mark, that praise made her feel better. He should not worry, and she showed the mark on her chest. Paracelsus asked her forgiveness for this. She said he should praise and thank her more often and then put her hand inside the mark. Everyone was surprised. Taking out a scroll, she said it was, as she thought, a list of rewards that automatically replenished when she received a reward from him. The main character said he had given her nothing, and she replied that his heart, not his head, had made the choice, and his genuine belief that he would be worse off without her ended up benefiting her. Nora said she couldn't read and asked him to do it. He said it was about 3% profit. Her account now held 25,000 zeni. He admitted he had praised her too highly, and she smiled in agreement. When the girl said she would be free in an instant, the main character handed her a bag containing 200,000 zeni and told her it had to be taken to that merchant. Nora said she understood everything, and he gave her another bag with 20,000, asking her to spend it on clothes, saying she did not have to give him any change and could use it as she wished. The girl said firmly she might be a servant but not a beggar, that she would earn the money, buy her freedom, and return the change. Paracelsus found it hilarious. He says she belongs to him and asks her to put on clean clothes and rest so she can work hard tomorrow, and he tells her to view this as an investment in her future work. Nora felt embarrassed and said she had gone to buy something for the elf too, and he thanked her, realizing he had forgotten about the girl. Walking the city streets, the girl remembered her past. Her hair was short, and her hands were shackled. Someone said servants could only be bought inside the country. The man said he had never met such rude girls. The merchant said he was unlucky, and the man added that at least he had let his soul out when he offended her. The merchant laughed. After the man left, the merchant said he would not deal with someone who did not know how to treat servants. The contract was a mess and would have to be rewritten. Turning to Nora, he told her to greet her senior comrades. Even in such a world, one must not forget decency, but she said nothing and just turned her head to the side. The merchant laughed and told her she needed to be taught how to behave, saying he would train her properly and make her a full-fledged servant. Nora said she wanted to master the country's written language and asked him to teach her the letters. She would read many books, learn, and leave the country as soon as she could. The merchant told her she was stupid and said only a poor, foolish man would buy someone like her. It would be a miracle if his house had even a single book. The man asked if she knew who foolish people love. Those are people more foolish than they are, so do not teach her the letters. If she suddenly learns them, have her pretend she cannot read. They will touch and read everything to her themselves. The merchant said that from her point of view, the situation may seem absurd, but even in absurdity, there are rules and ways to make money. After a while, the girl came home and said she had taken a bath. The main character lay on the sofa reading a book. He turned to her and said something might interest them. Legend says, the elves were the first people to live in this world. God made them from the matter that filled his body. This gave rise to an ideal life, beautiful in both body and spirit. Next came dragons of flame, dwarves of metal, and humans of earth. But the god did not consider any of the later creations successful. Only the elves were his favorites. They were immortal, and the god gave them the power to change the whole world. The protagonist asked where the elves' immortality had gone. The other man said the elves lost it when they fell in love with humans, then turned to Nora and told her to look at the text. He sat up to show her. She said she could not read. Paracelsus asked why she was dressed like that. Nora said she had bought it with change, and that he had told her to spend the money as she saw fit. He agreed sheepishly, and the girl asked what he really did not like. The protagonist then asked whether she would get a huge reward just because he had touched her, and she said that if he believed that, it would be so. She said the owner called her beautiful, seemed to want to touch the girl's beautiful body, and thought she might earn a lot from it, and she says it so directly. Paracelsus touched her and wondered if they were so soft they seemed about to melt. Yet at the same time they felt cheerful, springy, and bold. She asked him about the reward. He answered yes, and the girl decided to touch him herself. He then asked her to wait, saying she would drain all his money. Nora said that if he had no right to do so, he should order her to stop. A new day arrived. Nora asked how much had been run up. The main character said it was about 2 million zeni, and Nora laughed. Paracelsus admitted he was a poor master. He let the servant go only a day after buying him. The servant had little money and asked to repay the debt bit by bit, and she agreed. The main character said that even though they were together for only one day, he enjoyed himself, and even after regaining his freedom, she should not forget he is on her side, and she can turn to him if she needs anything. Nora immediately asked him what he meant, and said she would not be free at all. The man was shocked by her words. She said she would not find another place to earn a couple of million a night, and that with him she would earn a fortune. He could give her an order, but he cut her off and asked if that was true. The protagonist asked if she could stay and work here after he was freed, and she said that would break the contract's spell. Paracelsus considered it, asked if leaving everything as it was would be more profitable for her, and then said this was very good. Nora asked if he opposed it, saying she would take all his money. He agreed and said it would not be good to be left penniless. He said it was a blessing to have someone so valuable working under him. Embarrassingly, he is now eager to tackle the entire debt. He will work hard to earn what is needed so she can stay as long as she wants. Paracelsus said the elf needed an expensive treatment to replenish her magical energy and restore her body, and he also owed Nora a fair amount of money. For that reason, the main character decided to earn a little money. The girl said it was good. Then he put a huge pile of papers on the table. Nora asked what it was. He said it was a record of everything he had ever made and suggested they see what they could profit from. She asked if he had forgotten that she could not read, and he said she only needed to remember 4 symbols, with S the highest and C the lowest. Each entry begins with a similar table listing market price, manufacturing difficulty, material difficulty, and storage difficulty. The indicators may not be exact because he based them on his own impressions. Mithril silver, for example, is hard to synthesize and the raw material is rare, but the process poses no risk of injury. The finished metal is easy to store, it does not spoil, and it commands a high price. She said what was obvious to her. They started work immediately. After a while, she said they seemed to be finished. He replied that they were leaving the sheets because it was difficult to obtain materials for B and C. Finally, they choose recipes with manufacturing difficulty rated S or A. These are their candidates. She wanted to know why they ignore the market price because she wants to make a profit. They said such items require expensive or hard-to-find materials, and if the finished goods do not sell, the losses would be large, so they will stick to items that are easy to make and carry little risk. She wanted to know if the high manufacturing difficulty rating meant making the item was a hard, dangerous process, whether a failed attempt could still be sold, and whether an injury would end their efforts. Paracelsus said there would be no problem, and he would explain later. First, they had to sort them out. Norris said she understood, but they would not do anything dangerous. Injuries would mean losses. The remaining notes included 3 recipes they could use: a multi-purpose magic bomb, a luck potion that grants good fortune for the rest of the day, and communication bells. Nora asked what they would make from it. Thinking a luck potion would be best, she suggested it. He agreed and said he should first explain how difficult and dangerous creating things can be. The protagonist asked whether the secrecy order still applied after the contract ended, and the girl said ending the contract lifted all restrictions. She suggested it would work if he agreed that when the contract ends, she would forget all her secrets. He said the ability to alter memories is very powerful. Nora agreed and said there was a long magic formula. The contract was a small enchantment ritual, and the extra promise to serve had to be strong. The protagonist said she was well informed, like a real magician, and the other woman said she knew nothing about it and had only heard it from a merchant. Paracelsus said that was great, and asked her to tell him more next time, and she at first wanted to agree, but then said she had already told him everything she knew. Saying he wanted to see his long formula, he admitted he did not know magic and might not understand it, then reached for her hand, but she refused. Nora said this area was reserved for the services and off-limits to everyone else. If he tried to enter, a powerful curse would throw him back. He apologized to her. Becoming a servant means tying your life to a powerful curse. As a contract partner, he was also bound by it. Nora said she never reveals secrets and always does her job well. The main character smiled and said he knew that. Paracelsus said the information he was about to share was something any alchemist would die for, and it would be dangerous if it made her a target. She said that even if she were tortured, she would not tell the secret, and he asked if even injuries would mean the end of everything, and she replied that choosing a job and being responsible for it were two different things. He gave her the order. Paracelsus said he would now tell her one secret, but if she was released from the contract or anyone else tried to learn it, she would forget it. He added that it was an order. The girl replied that she understood everything. He then said he would tell her, and that he came from another world. He used to live in a very ordinary world without magic. There were things he did not like, but overall it was not that bad. You can never return to that place, so he omits the details. He was hit by a truck and died. Some time later he woke in an unfamiliar place and saw an old man who seemed to be called Laus, greeted him, and said he had been reborn in another world. Paracelsus was surprised by his words. The man said he had prepared a gift for his second birthday. From this catalog he could choose 2 cheat skills he liked. The protagonist asked what kind of world it was and why he was going there. Knowledge of the world would affect his choice. The man said it tired him and told him to choose quickly. Paracelsus apologized to him. He decided he did not want combat skills because they would force him to fight constantly to survive, so a skill that could save him later would be useful. The main character then said he had chosen the skill recipes for the building's entire world and the creator of save points, and the old man said it was trivial but agreed with his choice. He then told Paracelsus to fall asleep, and said that when he woke, he would be in another world and should live there and go where his soul wanted. The main character woke up to find a real other world around him and somehow knew how to use cheating skills. Paracelsus warned that Nora might not believe the story, so she asked him to tell the whole tale to the end and said they would discuss belief later, then asked whether his power was really connected to alchemy. When he picks the recipe he wants, the notebook shows all the needed ingredients and steps. 5 slots are available at a time. The paper never ends. Using a few combinations, he can select the recipe in his mind. If the recipe owner follows the instructions exactly, the result will be perfect regardless of their skill. Once the creation is complete, the slot is freed. The second power creates precious stones called save points at will. Creating a second stone makes the first disappear. By breaking such a gem, he returns to the moment he created it, keeping all his memories, so if the gem is destroyed, he comes back to the same time and place. The price would be his memories, and the feelings tied to what he loved most. When the stone broke, he had never used that skill. Nora said the skills were incompatible, and he agreed. Breaking it unexpectedly would be a disaster. He keeps it in a strong mithril silver box. The box is unlocked, and only his chosen people may see it. Paracelsus asked to see it, but she refused. The protagonist said he would arrange for her to see her later. If he died, he wanted her to break the stone. He asked if she could do it, and she refused. Nora said that if her master died, the contract would end, and the order to forget everything she kept secret would be carried out, and she made sure he understood she would also forget the stone, leaving the protagonist shocked. The main character said it was clear to him that he needed to prepare for the worst, but she asked if he really planned to make a bomb. Paracelsus asked what would happen if he left only that secret in her memory, and she said hasty decisions were unwise and they should think it over carefully before deciding. He asked her if she had any questions. Wanting to confirm his power was real, she checked it, and then asked him to create a new crystal because it had to be made the moment she learned the secret. After a while, he gave her a gold Hermes coin from the Alchemy Society, a group of leading alchemists that offered services like rank advancement. No one compares to alchemists when it comes to money. On the front is Hermes Trismegistus, the chief of the alchemists. Nora said she loved them. A red-eyed owl on the back stands for wisdom, and in this country a lunar eclipse is seen as a sign of bad luck and illness. 100 gold coins with Hermes, a suitably sized aquarium, gravel, algae, and goldfish are the ingredients of the fish of happiness. And this task will show them that the recipes of the entire universe are real. The main character said they need to stand beside the aquarium and throw a gold coin at eye level. Hermes smiles and a small bit of happiness is already in their hands. Paracelsus said that when they threw the second coin, an owl appeared and they lost their luck. They must retrieve the coins and start over. Once the coins land the right way, they cover them with gravel and seaweed and leave them for a day. After the water quality stabilizes, they add the eggs. Nora said getting 100 Hermes in a row is quite a task. The girl asked whether this was alchemy, and he said turning base metals into gold is real alchemy, though the effect is rather weak. Nora said no one would buy it. He replied that clients trust alchemy guild certificates and avoid untrustworthy places. She said no one would buy it. Paracelsus said she now understands how hard it is to set up all the conditions for the fish of happiness, and she replied she would never do it. And he added that this notebook is now coming onto the scene. The object in his hands began to glow, and the main character said it was a recipe for the fish of happiness. I did not think he was having fun. He slapped his forehead and said there was a way using gold coins. The girl asked if something was wrong. He said there were so many branches and so many ways to gather luck. He figured out the method in his head and wrote it in his notebook. The recipe makes every coin thrown into the aquarium land face up. If his power is real, it will happen. Nora looked into the aquarium and said they all fall upward like Hermes. 4 coins had already fallen on the right side. The main character asked whether at least one had fallen on the wrong side. Paracelsus said the coins were heavy, but he refused to give up. In the end, all 100 coins landed on the same side. It was amazing. He asked if she believed him. She said yes and asked how others managed it with 100 coins. He said they used luck-boosting items, but even they struggled. The protagonist said he had to free up a slot, so he would have to complete the whole process. Next comes gravel. Nora asked if she could help, and he said that would need to be checked too. She asked whether breeding fish was really that hard, and whether we could raise more, and he said we should limit ourselves to the number we have now. 3 reasons explain this. Selling the fish at a high price will be hard. The Chemical Association's certificate is expensive. He does not want the community to see that he got lucky 100 times in a row. Many alchemists are treacherous. Nora agreed. And Paracelsus said all that remained was to wait for the egg to hatch. She asked whether the coins could be taken out yet, and he said the recipe required waiting for the fry to grow. The girl said it was unsafe to leave them there. Gold coins are very valuable. He replied that she did not need to worry because no one would think to look for coins in the aquarium. Few people go there. Then he left. I looked around and said the smell was faint, but the old building's shadow falls here and the humidity is high, so it should be here. Crawling across the floor, she found a grasshopper and pushed it into the ground with the other grasshoppers. Nora Patan, a sorcerer from a distant land, turned to the spirit sleeping in this land and asked it to hear her voice and listen to her despicable wish. A creature with one huge eye suddenly rose from the ground and asked if she had called it. She said yes. Nora worries someone will steal the treasure her master left out in the open. The spirit asks why he left it unattended, and she says her master is a bit careless. The spirit told her to rely on him and said he knew how to hide well. He was glad she called a humble soul like him a spirit and told her to call him any time. The girl thanked him. The spirit sank back into the ground and she thought his strength was limited, but she was glad he took his duty seriously and was easy to handle. It was the first time she had dealt with such a cutie. The girl thought of the saying that people like to live where the spirits are like them. She giggled. The protagonist said he had demonstrated the recipe's power and now had to choose between a magic bomb, a potion of luck, and a bell of communication, while the potion of luck, like the fish of happiness, increases luck. The purity of the composition matters and has practical benefits. A drunk adventurer is less likely to run into a monster or be hit by a weapon. Paracelsus held up a bottle of the potion and said, "This is real. Even high-ranking people with many enemies never leave home without it. If you find a good customer, one recipe can supply it for life." He replied that when talking about the pros, you must not forget the cons. The Alchemy Guild certificate is expensive. He grimaced. Customers will not buy the potion without a manufacturing certificate proving the correct production method and a certificate of effectiveness confirming it actually increases luck. Registration will reduce profits. About 20% of the product will be used to confirm the effect, and the girl asked whether he could test the potion on himself, but he replied that if he could, certificates would be pointless. Nora asked how to tell how much luck had improved. To Achieve replied that you could just toss coins for that, though he had heard people were using beetles lately. Start with 100 beetles, paint one to mark it, use a luck-boosting item on it, then kill the beetles one by one and record how long the marked beetle survives. The protagonist wondered whether they were fools for only tossing coins and not having to kill anyone. People believe taking a life makes the action stronger. Nora said the effect does increase. This is mainly about witchcraft, and the more lives a sorcerer destroys and the deeper the victim's sorrow at death, the luckier the sorcerer becomes. Paracelsus noted she sounded calm when she spoke about witchcraft. He asked for more details. She said she did not know anything else and that they should go back to talking about the potion. The second disadvantage is the short production period, because some ingredients must be refined under the light of the full moon, and alchemists begin buying them up when the season arrives. Even if they brew the potion, the protagonist said, they still must wait for the full moon. Nora asked about another 2 weeks. He warned that there would be a very unpleasant third minus. The products they prepared were too pure, so he wondered if that was really a problem since they'd make more money, and told her to calm down. All the publicly available lucky potions are C-grade or worse, or plain fakes. Alchemists' imperfect methods leave traces of bad luck in the mixtures as they try to find a pair of good luck. A lucky potion with B-class purity is unlikely to ever appear on the market. A-class potions may not even exist. Nora asked what kind of potion he makes. He replied that whenever he followed the recipe, the result always exceeded S and became an S-class potion, which surprised the girl. She called it very good, but he disagreed, saying the sly alchemists watched their colleague from dawn to dusk with the help of golems and artificial fairies, and inexperienced alchemists lost everything in an instant. It would be fine if only the work was taken. Each year, a talented newcomer disappears. It is dangerous to draw unnecessary attention. Nora said he was right. The girl offered to brew a luck potion once they finished the preparations, while her face remained very serious. She said all they had to do was find wealthy clients and supply them the goods without any certificates. Then they would earn a lot of money. If those clients became regular customers, they would not need to create many potions. The protagonist tried to explain it was impossible, but she insisted they would create it, and he said they would move on to the next recipe. These are bells of connection, made at the same time with the same scale and appearance, so they form a link, and the less they differ in color and shape, the stronger their properties. The main character said he created the couple himself, and the girl replied that they really ring at the same time. Paracelsus said they only have a different kind of amber, and because theirs is defective, the cheapest on the market are better. Nora asked whether following the recipe exactly would guarantee success, and he replied that the recipe's power did not cover the second item. The recipe gives steps to create one item and notes he can make as many as he wants. After the first item is completed, the procedure ends and the recipes disappear. Both bells are made together, but they cannot be finished at the same time. Only the one made a moment earlier becomes a work of art. The next item still came out slightly better than with no recipe, and it seemed its main power was released exactly when the structures were completed. The main character said the most important thing for this alchemical product is that it show no difference even in the smallest details. You could say that his communication bells, only one of which worked, were a total failure. They sounded awful, and the view through the hole was blurry. She said even the power of recipes was limited. The main character said they needed to make a bomb, but the girl refused, so they asked her to at least listen to the description, and she agreed. The method of making the bomb is like casting a wizard's spell. A bomb this size could easily lift their house into the air, so Nora asked him not to bring it inside. He reassured her that it would not explode until he connected the detonator here and entered the correct code. The bomb had been made exactly to the recipe, so it could not misfire. The bombs are built to recreate the magician's spell the moment they receive a special magical signal from the detonator. When the signal arrives, the command panel orders the elements to change. Near the command panel, the air element becomes flammable gas, cracking the bomb and filling the area with gas and fire elements. The team reaches the fire element, which ignites the gas and causes an explosion. Nora asked why the water element was there. It served as a fuse in case a command came from outside, he said. The farthest center would react, and the water element would activate first, turning into water. Asked what would happen if the bomb caught fire, he said the water element would disappear. The fire element would not burn, the air element would become normal air, and the explosion would only rupture eardrums and cause burns. He then said they were putting a magic cap over the exposed wire and the bomb was ready, and he asked her if she could see it was completely safe. The main character said that for bombs to sell steadily, even a bomb made exactly by the recipe won't attract extra attention, and if you're careful, there's no danger. Nora agreed and asked to set the bomb so that if it exploded, the wave would destroy the gem. He said he would do so. She added that it would remain in place until they found a better product. The girl asked how much force it would take to destroy the crystal. The explosion would kill them both, and it wouldn't be funny if the crystal stayed intact, so the guy said he'd have to think about it. He planned to put the crystal in a box with one side facing the bomb. A metal pin was fixed to the back wall. When the blast wave pushed the box wall inward, the pin would pierce the gem. The protagonist will place the box in the kill zone so it does not interfere with his work, saying it would be safe. Nora said he looks happy. When she asked if he really liked the bomb, he said he might, because imagining it exploding and destroying everything made him feel light and good. Nora said he seemed more timid to her because of his comments about fearing people in the alchemical community, and the man laughed, saying it was good he understood how the bomb worked. Just then the doorbell rang. The protagonist called out to ask if he had already arrived. An unknown man stood on the threshold. Nora asked whether it was really a bell of communication. Paracelsus replied that its pair was the bell at the entrance. He made 4 sets at once, so now he knows when guests arrive no matter where he is in the house. Totori appeared and thanked him for remembering the Arlenbeek magic shop. His good ear always made him notice how bad it sounded. The protagonist introduced Nora and said she had just arrived at his house. Totori said he should have dressed her better. Paracelsus tried to introduce the man to her, but the man cut him off and introduced himself, saying Paracelsus was his regular client. The other man blushed. Totori asked if he was still embarrassed when his name was called. At their first meeting, he blushed and stammered his name and understood nothing. The protagonist said he did not like to give his name. Totori interrupted and asked why they had called him. Paracelsus replied that they wanted to sell something. That bomb looked magical. A man said it was dangerous. It just sat on the table, apparently well balanced. They were crazy to put the bomb that high. Totori said the stable elements are tightly packed and produce a good sound. The work is done perfectly, and no bells compare. The man said Paracelsus rarely bargains and would give a good price right away, offering 90,000 zeni, and the main character said he could add another 20,000 later, so the total might reach 100,000. Totori said that if all 20 were the same quality, they could be sold in a good place, so he offered 95,000 for each. The protagonist and Nora exchanged satisfied glances. Paracelsus said they had agreed, but Nora proposed settling on 130,000, and Totori, surprised, said someone had not been listening to the conversation. The man set the price at 800 zeni, would bring the materials in 2 later visits with their cost deducted from the total, and would have to redo the work if the quality dropped at all. Totori said he was glad to work with them. The protagonist shook hands and said it was mutual. Then the man turned to the woman. He said his employer offers free lessons to servants. If her master agrees, she can learn practical everyday skills, so she should come. The protagonist said it was great. The girl blushed but replied that she was not interested in such things. Paracelsus told her she could go. Totori asked to take the bomb to show his employer, and the main character agreed, saying he would pack it now, and Totori bowed and thanked him. Turning back to Nora, he told her the study group also served as a mutual aid society, and if she ran into any problems, she could tell them. Totori asked her whether everything was okay with them, laughed, and said he was glad she had found a master she could rely on. At that moment, the protagonist entered the room with the aquarium and asked why a boulder was there, worried that the aquarium was missing and that his gold coins had been stolen, while the spirit thought it was a swindler. Nora entered the room, told him to touch the top of the stone, asked what he felt, and he replied that it was rough like any stone. The girl told him to look at the hand he had used to touch the stone, and he saw it was wet. Nora said the spirit was showing him an illusion, and that the aquarium was still there. He asked whether the spirit could really use such strong magic. She explained it could only do that within its territory. The protagonist said he had heard that spirits form when the spiritual traces that leak from creatures' remains gather together. No one expected this one to have such power. She said he was saying strange things. Nor has said that humans also form a mixture of water, grass, and living beings, and she sees little difference between them and spirits. So if he anchors a spirit, he cannot live here and should be careful with his words. The protagonist asked if she knew so much about sorcerers because she was one of them. Bowing, she apologized for not saying so sooner. He asked why she had stayed silent. She said the merchant told her to keep quiet because people believed witches either scare others or are used by people. Nor decided to confess to him since he didn't fit that description. She asked whether she had scared him and said she would give up her witchcraft if so, then asked whether he really looked scared. The main character smiled at her sweetly, asked whether the spirit was nearby, and the girl said it was. He asked whether he should pray. She warned that if he approached prayer with little knowledge, his actions could offend the spirit and told him to bow slightly each time he passed the well. Blushing, Nora asked why Paracelsus was smirking at her. He said he was glad she had told him everything. Nora said he had scared her. Night had fallen, and the house was nearly dark. The protagonist stepped into the room and asked how things were going. She did not mention that she had just finished wiping Kokomochi's body, and when Paracelsus asked about the name again, the girl blushed. In the country's language, it was the word for a baby. It reminded her of the time she had to care for her little sister, calling someone that would be rude when they were struggling to survive. Just an elf. The protagonist agreed she should be given a name Nora could pronounce easily. He would call her Coco, and they would ask for her real name after her body was restored. He decided to start restoring her body with the simplest structure, the skin tissue, because it was thin and would not need much primordial matter, and Nora agreed that it was always important to start with the simplest. The main character said they would cut off healthy skin from the buttocks, clone it, and grow it like a vegetable. The girl tried to call to him, and at that moment Coco spread her legs. Nora said the girl would invite him if he touched her butt, and the main character blushed deeply. She said she would be glad if he used that place. They would keep her while she remained useful as a tool. That might make her feel better. She urged him to hurry and help her. The main character began to cry and asked her what he should do because nothing was working for him. Nora said she would do everything herself and asked him to step aside. Nora told the main character it was time to watch. Standing in the corner, he turned away from the bed. Tears filled his eyes as he asked whether she had really finished. She said that she had. He tried to apologize, but the girl said she had something more important to check when Coco got better. She put her hand on his back and said it was mental communication, which surprised him. Mastering communication with spirit is a crucial skill for shamans, and it also works with living beings. She can make her voice resonate in his spirit body by touch. The protagonist asked if she could hear him, and she said it felt like he was trying to send a thought to her, but she heard nothing. Nora reminded you of his words that the elves' bodies were mostly spiritual, and that this girl was different from them. Either way, if Coco is a spirit, even if she is not dead yet, it might be possible to establish contact with her, or at least let her hear a voice and check the condition of her soul and mind. The protagonist told her she was amazing, and the girl admitted she had tried to hide her shaman gift, but it had been revealed anyway. Nora knelt by the bed and felt she could sense the other's soul, then mentally asked if that person could hear her. No answer came, so she asked permission to look into her soul, and inside it was completely dark, and nothing could be seen. She discovered a curse inside her made of huge chains and was surprised by how many there were. The protagonist asked her what had happened. Nora told him it was a curse. Coco's soul was bound by an overwhelming number of curses. Paracelsus asked her whether this was the same as the magic of the servant contract. Her reply was that they also use a curse, but on a completely different scale, so they differ here. Curses that strong would not work properly, even if they covered the whole body. The contract magic already required creating a separate space called the servant's room. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the mark on her chest. Nora said they are in the servants' quarters. The rooms are created by stretching a servant's skin into another space. Everyone has at least one of these rooms. Stunned by her claim that the skin could stretch that way, the protagonist listened as the girl said reading the formula inside would reveal the curse's essence. Paracelsus asked if anyone outside the room would be affected by the curse, and she said it was true and could kill an ordinary person. After that, she touched her mark and pushed the walls apart. The protagonist said there was something black, and she replied that it was a curse, and he should never touch it. Nora said that if she did not return, he should seal the room and call someone skilled in shamanism. Then the girl's body was wrapped in a black fog. Inside, she saw a servant contract spell, but something deeper bound Coco's soul and she could not find its source. That year, she faced vast chains of curses, including bans on speaking, on sleeping, on breathing deeply. A curse that stole her mind, and curses that kept her from enjoying herself, from bringing joy to others, and from renewing herself. She begs him for help until she cannot, and when her days are numbered, he orders her to live, mourning her own stupidity, entrapment, pain, and humiliation, shaking with fear day and night. The protagonist called Nora right away. Nora told him not to come closer. Part of the curse had moved into her hand. When she raised her hand, a black clot followed and wrapped around it, making her fist and her entire arm up to the elbow turn black. The protagonist asked if she was okay, and she said that shamanic art exists because people constantly curse one another. She remembered people asking for someone to be made a miserable cripple, how they found a way to give power to those selfish requests, and she thought it wouldn't work. The shaman casts her first curse on herself. Everyone keeps cursing each other, but she wants to be a little better than the rest. She likes curses fueled by that kind of ambition. Nora's face was furious, tears running down her cheeks as she decided she would never forgive anyone who cursed like that. The main character immediately asked her to deal with the curse that had bounced back on her and to quickly wash the blackness from her hands. Nora explained that to contain the curse, you must align your emotions with those it contains and keep them under control, and she finds this difficult. The main character asked right away why it was hard for her, and the girl said she had not expected it to be exactly like this. She can't believe a deep, tender feeling is hidden in the curse. It is love. The main character asked whether her chest would fill with this feeling so something could be done, and she was told it would, but now anger filled her, making the task impossible. Nora said the curse might have been placed on purpose to make it harder to remove. Paracelsus was taking off his jacket then. Nora asked him what he was doing. The main character leaned toward her and told her to take off her top too, and she asked why, but in the end, she did as he asked. He lay down beside her on the bed, held her against his chest, and said that when they were skin to skin like this, he felt something almost like love. He asked her opinion, and she warned him to be careful because touching the curse could pass it to him, but he said that would be better than losing her. Nora turned to face him and said it would be better this way. Then she spoke the words, Coco Mikali, which he did not understand, said the curse was moving, and asked him to get off her. The protagonist said the curse had entered her mark. Nora said it was not easy to get rid of. She had moved it there so it would cause the least damage and planned to deal with it slowly. Paracelsus asked what she had said when they were lying in each other's arms, and she said she had said nothing, told him to stop acting as if she had, and he apologized. A new day arrived, and the sun was shining outside. The main character and the girl sat at the table. She asked if it was really a letter, and he said yes. He said that if he suddenly forgot his skill, he would try to write down its essence, the feeling it gave, and how to use it as clearly as possible. If he suddenly lost consciousness, she should tell him to calm down and let him read the letter. Nora asked why there were 3 letters. He said the first held his memories from when he arrived, and he wanted her to read it first. The second letter described his skills. In his third letter, he tried to describe the girl as precisely as he could because he feared those memories might fade, and she asked him why. Nora asked him why he still thought his skill was the most important thing. Her reward had already reached unprecedented heights, and he agreed. The protagonist told Tom she would also have a hard time if he lost his skill, then said she was just joking, and that in a year he would see she would be number 1 and no skill could beat her. Paracelsus said there was no need to fear losing the skill, but he felt sad at the thought of forgetting it. and the girl said it was not a problem. Nora would go first again so he could begin. A crystal would be made to mark this place as a safe point, he said. Then someone rang the doorbell. Saying it was too early to deliver the materials, the protagonist opened the door to find a girl who greeted him, and he greeted her in return. Glad to meet him, she said. Her name was Agnosia Dea, a member of the Alchemical Association, and then she asked if his name was really Paracelsus. He replied yes, thinking she was beautiful. The girl said she had heard that last week he had gone to the servant shop and bought an elf there and asked whether she had been badly injured. Acknowledge came to check that the girl was okay. She apologized to him for arriving so suddenly, and he led her into the house. Nora asked whether they really had guests. Paracelsus asked her to bring tea and told the guest that the elf was here on the second floor. The girl greeted the servant, who was lost in thought. Agnosia saw the elf and remarked that he had done so much in so little time, then asked whether her condition made it impossible to use the potion directly. She said he could not have achieved this without exact knowledge of the right method. This is a wonderful job. The protagonist blushed at her words. Agnosia asked why he had not spared time and money for her. He may have seen her body as alchemical material, but he said he could not leave her there and planned to give her freedom once she was cured. The alchemist said he was a good person, that she adored people like him, and that he could turn to her no matter what difficulties he faced. He said she seemed to hold a high alchemical rank, and she replied that there are only 3 adepts among the alchemists, that no woman has ever been an adept, and that she is the first in the world. The protagonist said that at his 3rd stage they were like heaven and earth. Agnosia laughed and said his words were music to her ears. He then asked what had brought someone like her to the servant. Showing him the stone from the yard, she said she could only use it to protect herself if he suddenly grabbed her body parts, and he replied he would not do that. Agnosia said that just as a child grows and buds bloom, each time better than before, a stone becomes gold. The girl said she had come to ease the elf's suffering, but now felt relieved and asked him to take care of her. He said she could count on him. At that moment, Nora called them to have tea. Agnosia handed him the objects. They were the eyes of truth, made by alchemy, and brought for this girl. The alchemist poured the tea and said it smelled nice, though the scent was unfamiliar, and Nora said it came from her rodent and asked her opinion. Agnosia said the walnut cake tasted very good, then asked whether the woman had made it herself. The woman said yes. The alchemist said that if she had not belonged to the man, they would have hired her. At that moment, the protagonist asked her if she could say a little more about those eyes. Agnosia said she had already forgotten them. These are called the eyes of truth. With them, a person does not see light, but the primary matter. They work in complete darkness. Depending on how perfect they are, a person can see the essence of matter and even other people's thoughts. This pair is her work and she is proud of it. They may be the sharpest eyes in the world. The eyes are coated with a dense concentration of primordial matter, so once placed in the eye sockets, sight should return within a week. Paracelsus said that if the elf had reached her, she would have healed her quickly. Agnosia suggested handing the girl over to him, but he refused and said he would cure her at any cost. The alchemist said it was excellent, and that she would surely be better than before. Nothing is better than improvement. Reaching out, she took one of his eyes and said she was taking it, and he would make a matching eye for the other himself and make it better than this one. After that, she turned and said he could call her any time if any problems came up, then left the house. Nora began to turn to the main character, but he said they would put it up right away, and called for her to follow him to the basement to make the usual preparations. Paracelsus asked her about it. It was her first time here, and she answered yes. She noticed the walls were covered with something, and he said it was a formula that deflected magic and drained mana from creatures, protects against spy fairies and clairvoyance. It can only absorb a limited amount of mana at once. You must leave the room so the formula can slowly release its stored mana. It cannot be used in the usual way. He showed her a silencing slime that eats sound vibrations, so nothing said here can get out. No time to linger, so he'll get straight to the point. The protagonist said he doesn't trust Agnosia and suggested she may have cursed Coco. She asked why he thought that. His answer was that the eyes of truth were too perfect. The color, size, weight, and even the shape of the blood vessels matched, so he assumed they were created at the same time. Paracelsus said he could never believe that the link between alchemical creations did not reach these eyes. She seemed to have planned from the start to keep one for herself. At that moment, Agnosia thought he had been delayed because, for some reason, he had already guessed everything. She still did not understand why he didn't trust her. He said that although she wanted to help, nothing happened until he took cocoa from the store. She had the money, and he didn't feel her offer was sincere. As soon as he bought cocoa and they felt the curse, she showed up and went straight to the house. Even if she didn't cast the curse, she was clearly involved. Nora thought about those words. Certain the alchemist cast the curse, she has several reasons to believe it, and she smells like the curse placed on cocoa. The perfume smells completely different. It's the first time she's encountered a scent like this, and she's almost certainly right. She connected with Agnosia so she could attack her at any time. A soul always recoils when it comes into contact with a different kind of being, like a shaman, but that did not happen this time, because the curse had already nested in the soul. The protagonist asked again, and she said she'd become friends with her and that people are naturally influenced by those they're close to. The spell cannot grow if the other person doesn't know they are cursed. By building a relationship with Nora, who treats the curse as normal, the person's heart starts to feel it. A strong bond has many benefits, especially because it makes curses easier to cast. Paracelsus asked her if they had such a bond and wondered what was happening to her hair. Nora said she found it strange that she'd been careless and let him see the other eye. If she had brought only one, he would not have suspected anything. He agreed with her. The main character said they need to hurry. They also think the eye should go on Coco. Clearly an adept. This girl has both strength and power. If she wanted to, she could deal with them in no time. He thinks she has her own reasons for not doing so. They should look after Coco, watch the girl's mood, and plan self-defense. If it gets too hot, they'll run away. Nora agrees. Paracelsus said he might not be very brave, and the girl replied that was not true, and his dying now would be pointless. Nora asked what was wrong, and he said he felt a little cold, apparently with no man left on the surface of his body, so she offered to run for that tea, and he said yes. The protagonist said it had a strange aroma, and the other man replied that the tea was called Ochipa. Realizing that was the name of a tree, he asked whether those trees grew in abundance here. Nora explained that the plant was poisonous, and that eating it raw could cause diarrhea, but the poison could be neutralized with another plant. The protagonist said his interest was piqued. The girl said that since it had come to that, they might as well cook it, and called him to the stove. She showed him a purple-green root and said it was a potent remedy, but large doses cause nausea, and when combined with a chapa, it becomes docile. After that, she uses the uchako to cool the broth, and when he asks about the word, she explains that they pour it into another container. As it cools, she pours dried ochapa leaves and ginger into the teapot, and, if desired, adds pocote or UKO. He thought about the names. After the broth container cools to the touch, the uchako is placed in the teapot. Next, they cover the lid and the peppery. You must hold the torrid peri and the pecatacare. She then spoke a whole sentence in a language he did not know. Realizing she had been speaking her native language, she apologized, and he told her it was very beautiful. The tea was ready, she said. After inhaling its unique aroma, he found it tasted delicious and warmed him through. The protagonist said it tasted delicious, and he liked the aroma. She said she was glad to hear it. Then he said he now understood what she smelled like. Nora asked if she really stank that much. He said that when she got hot and sweaty and they hugged, a smell came from somewhere on her body that he had never smelled before. Now he realized it was the tea's smell and said it wasn't unpleasant, that it made him want to breathe it in again and again. At that moment, the girl snatched the mug from his hands. She said she would bring him plain tea, but her face was very red, and the protagonist thought about what had happened. A man insulted Nora. Another warned him it was forbidden and the boss would be angry. The first man said they were training her and then told the girl she would not leave until she obeyed. The second man said servants belong to all citizens and cannot be harmed without reason, and the boss said it is even written in the law. The first man said he did not care about the law. After the men left the room, Noroth thought she could still survive intimacy, but she was simply not cut out for service. Someone called her name and her hair formed a head. She recognized her father. He apologized and said it had taken him a long time to find her. A soul without a body finds it hard to act alone. Nora asked whether he had really bound the soul with a curse, warned that he would need a good night's sleep after death because his torment would only continue, and he told her not to worry. The girl said there was nothing good in this. He died of his own accord, gave up the peace he deserved, climbed into someone else's hair without asking, and he apologized to her. Nora asked whether he meant he would pull her out of captivity. Father said a shaman cannot curse himself. Until today, he had been helpless and soulless. Now, he is part of her. The girl said it doesn't change anything, and he said he knows a Charmine who is inexperienced but exceptionally gifted, and that Charmine is her. Nora said that even if she had the power, she still could not use it for herself, and her father said she would need bonds here. People live under the influence of those closest to them, and in a marriage the husband carries a little wife inside him, and the wife carries a little husband inside her. He told Nora to become a great shaman, to create a small but powerful shaman inside those she formed bonds with, and then cause those people to curse themselves. He told her to watch, contact them, find out what was forbidden to them, and then force them to break the ban. Nora asked what she had to do to make it happen. Her father told her to believe completely that it would. If she could, no one would look down on her anymore. Morning arrived. Men entered her room and told her to get up for class. They were surprised to see her hair had grown. Nora said she had grown up, and then told one of the men he still had not grown, and that his brain was smaller than her younger brother's. He grew angry. A man rushed at the girl, grabbed her, and offended her. A second man tried to stop him because he was rougher than usual. Nora responded that servants are the common property of citizens and must not be harmed without reason, and those who break this law should be punished. When the man asked her if she was really a shaman, it stopped being funny, and she turned to his friend and told him to get up. Her father praised her for doing well. Nora told him he did not have to protect her. She wanted someone to hurt her more so he would get hurt more. The man asked to sit and watch his daughter get hurt, and he did not care how badly she was hurt. He said he was hit hard and doubted her offense would be such a taboo for him. Nora said she thought the curse had been strengthened by the person standing behind him. The man was connected to the first, so it is natural that the curse would strike the man who broke the ban before the person for whom the ban was the same. The father said his daughter frightened him because she is so well informed. He said the men were in such a hurry they forgot to close the door, then asked what they would do and added he could overcome the curse on her. She replied she would not run. She did not realize that the country's laws carefully spelled out how to communicate with servants, and that those rules would determine her living arrangements and how she would earn most of her money. A new day has come. Do not go back to the main character to ask what the item on the table does. Paracelsus explained that she was collecting elements of fire. She then asked whether this was the material for a magic bomb, and he confirmed it. He explained how the bomb worked, and said that if the fuel is heated just below combustion, the fire elements in the air will be drawn to it. This recipe is ideal for beginner alchemists and yields many elements, and when heated air elements rise and inevitably mix with fire elements. These fire elements made by this recipe are pure and far better than market products. They are hard to ignite without any air element. If there is no heat or magic, they remain stable. When Nora asked, he said he had already ordered the raw material for the bomb, but that it was only a distraction because novice alchemists cannot produce material pure enough for a bomb, so he would sell the material to another seller. The girl asked if this meant he would recoup the money. He said yes, and added that he would get the other elements himself so they would make a good profit, and he did not offer her any help. She asked what was heating the coin because no fire burned anywhere in the house, and the protagonist said it was hot on its own since its pair was stored at the Alchemical Association and they were heating it. Nora said she understood why the coin stayed warm even though the kitchen stove was not lit. He asked her if there really were no traces of fire left anywhere in the house. Paracelsus apologized and explained that this happens when you collect bomb materials in large quantities, and she replied that it was fine. They were earning money and would not go hungry. The protagonist said that in those cases the ability to use fire returns only after 3 days. For the next 3 days they had to eat outside the house or make do with the coin's heat. Ellen Bick Magic Shop. Besides alchemical supplies and magic items, the shop accepts orders to apply magic formulas. There is a snack bar on the first floor. Norin told Tutori to step aside and said, "Cutting bombs is bad for the heart." Tutori said the elements stay quiet while inside the magic seal, and Norin replied that so much work was wasted. She said Tutori had brought the bomb and they should check the cut. Tutori said it looked good, a beautiful piece of work. The big bird said it was almost too beautiful a piece of work. Norin asked Burke if he agreed. Burke said the composition was too pure for humans to create. Tutori asked who could do it, and the others assumed adepts. Norin said they might not be like that, but the goods Paracelsus supplied them were either the work of a novice or too perfect. Paracelsus tried to fool them with clumsy technology, but this time he gave himself away completely. She said he might be the bearer of gifts, so this must be checked quickly. We will need to create fairies. Mukugan and Pochiko in the main character's house should keep an eye on him. Mudrin said if someone wanted to eat, she would go, and they could continue. It turned out to be Nora, who said she would like to have lunch to take with her. The woman said she hadn't seen her here before. Mudrin said Beastmen worked here, so there were no meat dishes. Nora asked with a dissatisfied look if there really was nothing but herbs. Mudine said the first portion would be free, and that Nora could take it with her if she liked it. Nora replied that she loved free food. Then she placed a bean burger with vegetable curry on the table in front of her. It smelled good. Nora said it smelled delicious and immediately stuck her fork into the dish to take her first bite. Her face flushed, showing she liked it. She asked for it to be wrapped to take with her, and Modrin thanked her for the purchase. Nora said it was the first time she had tried something so tasty and not meaty. The woman said the dish was made especially for meat lovers. The girl thanked her and asked where the Ellenbick magic shop was. Mudrin told the hostess that a man from Paracelsus's house had come to see them, and she immediately grew excited. Moments later, Norn started down the stairs but fell. Norn asked if she was okay. She said the stairs and floor were soft and that she was glad to meet you. The girl gave her name, and the owner introduced herself, saying she was on good terms with the main character. Nora said that did not matter, but she had heard from a human, a rabbit, that a study group met here. The Norn told her that fortune was very favorable, and that she had the power to influence people's destinies. She told Nora she loves money and will use any means to reach her goals. Yet she easily starts relationships with people she likes and could become Paracelsus's partner because fate brought them together. Norton called it a small personality guessing game mixing physiognomy with personal research, then asked if she was close. He said he was completely wrong. Someone asked the host if she would spare some time for her before the lesson, and turning to Mudrin, the host said she liked this girl and would speak to her privately. After a while, they found themselves in another room. Norn explained that conversations held over this tablecloth were hidden from others, and that she had invented it herself. Nora asked her if it was magic or alchemy, to which Nora replied that she was using every method she knew, and the girl realized that she was also using advanced shamanic magic. The host explained that using methods from many fields, it is possible to make walls even magicians and alchemists cannot easily get past. Nora said she wanted such a tablecloth and asked what it means to keep secrets. Norton said she wanted her to sign a magical contract that would bind them to keep the whole conversation secret and not harm each other until the contract was broken. I also thought about how people here treat shamanism as magic, which angers her every time. So she asked whether anyone had been harmed, found it suspicious, and turned to her father to call it a strange curse. Although she cannot read the document, she can tell how it works from the curse's shape, and compared with the service contract technique, this bond is too weak, because the spell makes it psychologically difficult for a person to reveal the secret. The girl asked whether the copies of the contract were linked. Norn raised a finger and said the girl was right. The bonds holding this document are very weak and easy to break. If they break, the bonds on her copy will disappear too. She will treat that as a declaration of war. No one thought it was a good mix of witchcraft and alchemy. It was probably her own invention. She agreed to sign but said she could not write in the local language and offered to leave a thumbprint. Norin asked whether she had learned alchemy after arriving in Paracelsus. The woman answered yes. The hostess said she was amazed at how much the woman knew about it. The woman said she had beautiful letters and really wanted to see her in the study group. Nora asked what they wanted to talk to her about. Norn said that some people had come to them from another world and were endowed with special powers. The girl tensed immediately. It was bad, and she needed to act naturally. She was in deep trouble. The host kept saying she had called such people bearers of gifts. Over that time, she met 4 people, 2 adventurers, a merchant, and an alchemist, each with different skills. Unaware she had to watch her expression, she may have suspected Paracelsus and used the conversation as an excuse, naively believing she could get useful information. Norn told her assistant that to notice the contract's unnaturalness, one needed the knowledge of a magician or shaman. She had understood everything from the color of her skin and her accent, and the language of the signature confirmed it. The mistress believed the mix of a cowardly, gifted person and a pragmatic shaman could not be ignored. Shamans should not be able to attack the first person they meet directly. She had to act, knowing a web of magic surrounded her. Anyone in her place would have done the same. Norn thought of Paracelsus's fear that his powers would be exposed. The mistress imagined being in her place, asking about power to provoke magic, knowing Nora could curse her, erase her memory, or even kill her. She should think carefully before she speaks. Norn said only 1 in 4 people tried to use their power to help the world. I didn't think she had only 2 worries: avoiding becoming this woman's enemy and running away as fast as she could if that happened, since she had already done everything she could to protect her master. The girl feared that if she became the master's enemy, he would have her killed. The power belonged only to him and would not let her lay a hand on him. Norn watched the girl and saw her begin to calm, as if deciding how to act. The mistress assumed it was connected to murder. Now Ta would not run away and would listen to everything the mistress said. Ta would not live long if she was easy to control. Norn warned them that the powers were beyond their understanding, and no trick could make the bearers and the gifts guilty of crimes under this country's laws. She would not tolerate it. If the bearer of the gifts is a villain, he cannot be judged, and depending on the situation, the power will kill its owner. Nora asked her who decides right and wrong, and whether she would judge people. The hostess smiled and said no, then picked up the book and declared that civil law would judge them. Nora was shocked. Norn explained the law sets out the rules citizens must follow. Thieves pay a fine of 6 times the item's value. A third theft leads to amputation of a hand, and the murder of 3 or more citizens carries the death penalty. Servants belong to all citizens, including future free citizens, and may not be beaten or killed except as a just punishment. Anyone who cannot provide adequate housing must not buy servants. Norn wants equality for all people, so she opposes this law because she rejects the idea of servants and wants beesmen recognized as equal to humans. The hostess also said she still respects civil law, a treasure born from a long history of mistakes. She will do everything in her power as long as the prayer continues. Norn said she would not give special treatment even to someone bringing gifts. If he unjustly killed 3 people in this country, he should be sentenced to death. Nora, confused, asked Norn what to do while the girl with glasses stared at the table, leaning on a book. Norton explained she searched for the owners of gifts and then watched them to see if they were doing anything illegal, and if they turned out to be criminals, she would strip them of their powers or kill them herself. Nora said lynching was a crime in her country, and the alchemist replied it was the same in theirs, adding that she could not defend her actions because the girl had acted as she pleased. Norn put a book on the table with a cover showing scales against the sun, front-facing Nora, and said that if she came to study, she would have to master their language and civil law, adding that after that she would have to observe it with her master because only then could they become friends. The alchemist girl said firmly that no one should treat other people's lives like toys. Mudrin, picking up on the cowman, said it would be only over their corpses. And Norton said this was one of the things she wanted to tell Nora. That was enough for her, since she was already eager to return home, and the alchemist agreed the second issue could become a major problem for the couple. Norton observed that the number of gift-bearers coming into their world seemed to rise every year or two. The frequency of their appearance as Valians surprised him. The alchemists said that even so, the world could not be called overflowing with them, and asked why. The alchemists said they have spent 10 years searching for gifted people, and that talented alchemists and magicians tend to be unusually lucky or popular, so they have watched carefully for anyone who stands out. Norton said almost all the standouts had gone missing or died before anyone could determine whether they had gifts, and some had suffered serious injuries they did not recover from, which worried him. Nora jumped to her feet and demanded to know why it had happened. She said that, depending on the kind of powers, people could be kidnapped, and that there were plenty of reasons to arrest anyone who seemed suspicious. The slave considered their words and wondered if that could be true. Norn folded her hands and said she called those creatures reapers. She did not pause to think. She asked if they were hunting reapers too, and the alchemist said yes. Nor noted that if the reaper was alone, he could be seen as a dangerous repeat offender who had ruined nearly 100 lives. They also did not know how the reaper was using the powers he had stolen, which made him a dangerous enemy to them. Nora analyzed the dialogue and concluded the people around her would not block her or the master, as long as they followed civil law and kept them under surveillance, and she decided that winning their friendship would strengthen their security against the reaper's attack. The slave watched the person opposite the girl and weighed the problems, thinking they could not prove their claims, and that their knowledge of the stolen powers meant they had stolen them before, making them like the reaper. Nora lowered her face, worried those people might steal her gift and pass off a Celsius gift as their own in the name of the greater good and victory over the reaper. So she decided to stay on guard, though she did not know what to do next. Nora knew she was a poor fighter, and the girl across from her did not look strong either. It crossed her mind that her direct stare might have caught the alchemist off guard. Her neck prickled, warning her that cursing people for personal gain was wrong because she would get payback. A huge man entered the room and asked if anyone was there. Nora shuddered, and Norn did not even look at him. Moodying greeted him, and the man asked for 30 healing potions. The alchemist rose from the table and said she would do it now. Nora stayed seated, turned to the girl with a smile, and said they would end the conversation for now, adding that if the girl had any questions, they would discuss them next time, though she warned she would not be able to answer most of them. Mudrin suggested the guest cook something, but the man flatly refused anything without meat and rudely told her not to speak to him because she smelled like an animal. And the guest said that if they did not sell good potions, he would not have set foot there. So Norn forced a smile and thanked her for buying from them. While waiting, the man asked if they were hiring. The alchemist said the potions would arrive soon, asked him to wait a bit, and changed the subject at her desk. Nora began watching the girl. Lifting the dishes with a long holder made the slave think about cooking in the kitchen. A cowman approached Nora and set a linen-wrapped box down, saying the order was ready, and Nora thanked her. Modrina asked if she was surprised to see the alchemist in the kitchen. As the alchemist poured the potion, Nora said it seemed odd to have separate workshops and kitchens because the work was little different from everyday life and they even used the same utensils, and others agreed. Modrina said that unlike ordinary shops satisfied with workshop supplies, they mixed their potions with magic. At that time, Norn was enchanting a new batch of healing potions. The brute suggested closing Norn's canteen and turning it into a pharmacy, saying he was tired of seeing the beast man. Norn said opinions differed and many still found the canteen popular. The man heard a sound behind him. The thugs turned and met the gaze of two girls. The guest, already watching the girls, said he understood and added that the work just angered her and that cooking for the slaves was her calling, while the alchemist called to him and he answered as he shifted his gaze. Norn's glove flew into the guest's face, and the girl said angrily that she was challenging the brute to a duel. Norn pointed at the man and declared the battle would continue until he said, "I give up," or until it was impossible to go on, that any fighting style was allowed, but it would start here and now, and she said that if he lost, he must apologize to the guest. Raising his fist, the man said that if it was true, he would not joke about the blow and received agreement. Nora stood up and said she wasn't offended, but Modrin cut her off and told her to be quiet as she and the thug stared at each other without breaking eye contact. Throwing the glove back to the girl, the man agreed to the fight and insisted that if he won, Norn would become his slave, saying he would squeeze her until he tired of it. The girl caught her glove. Norn asked to take a few steps back. The man waved and agreed. The girl stepped back. The man pointed his thumb at the beast man and asked her to join him, saying at least this way they would have a proper duel. Norn refused and reminded him the battle was meant to be one-on-one. The bully misread the girl's distance as stupidity and assumed she wanted to be shamed. Mages used two methods of spellcasting. The internal method used mana released from the mage's body, making spells activate very quickly, but spell power depended on how much mana was applied, so nobles and royal family members used it most because their bloodlines held large reserves. The external method pulled mana from the mage's surroundings and shaped it. This allowed a spell's power to grow without limit, but it took time to activate. Gathering that mana still required an internal method, so the mage's innate ability affected the result. The man stood up. A skilled mage needs 4 seconds to cast a basic fireball, producing a small burst of flame. The man was a martial arts master who had fought alongside many mages and knew this from his own experience. The brute studied his opponent and knew to be wary of alchemical or magical devices, but he did not know which of those devices could fit in a small pocket, and he believed that even if the beast joined the fight, he could still knock Norn out with one blow. Smiling, the man hoped that even if the girl could still fight after the blow, he would remain the winner and not the loser. The bully knew that the moment the spell took effect, the girl would be defenseless, so he would run up and hit her in the stomach, avoiding her face. The girl pointed her hands forward as a signal to the man. The thug lunged forward and swung his fist, thinking the girl was about to vomit. Norn was a sorceress with a fatal flaw. She could not focus on one thing, so it was a miracle she reached second-class rank. Even while working harder than other mages, she still needed 20 seconds to summon a fireball. She later tried alchemy, but it also demanded concentration, so she never rose to the top. Exhausted by suffering, she gave up and chose 3 spells to master. The girl kept stretching her arms, drawing mana from the air into her whole body. Second, Nor used her left hand to control humidity, and third, her right hand to control heat. It had little effect on the atmosphere in the world of magic, but in the world of alchemy, it was crucial. With the power gathered in the girl's palm and the primordial matter made cold and dry, it turned into earth and then condensed. Norn sent the stone forward. The man advancing noted the spell's speed and the shard's sharpness. The brute smiled and decided he would not shy away from such a trifle. The man lunged at Norn's stomach. Only a few centimeters remained before contact. The man was surprised to see several sharp stones stuck in the thug's hands. He looked up to see 100 small, sharp stones aimed at him. The man was terrified and could not understand how the spell could be cast so quickly. Light filled the room. Once primordial matter is given a certain property, the reaction happens immediately, even if left alone. After waiting for Norn to react, she moved on to the tracking technique. The girl mixed dampness and cold. The man stepped forward again, realizing he had leveled up for a new attack despite his injury. Clumps of water rose from the ground into the air. Norn aimed her hands at the brute, and a huge crater burst from the ground, sending him flying. The man lay in the mud after falling, struggling to get up, while the enemy forced himself to stay calm, counting on Norn being busy with a spell and believing he could attack her even if the mud kept her out of sight. The man's body lay frozen to the floor, coated in ice. The brute shouted at Norn, demanding to know how she could keep casting spells without stopping and who she was. The girl's face lit up with a smile. While still casting her spell, she thought she was just adding new properties. Norn laughed softly, bringing warmth and moisture. Her specialty, she told herself, was steady focus. The stones started floating forward. Wind spun out from the stone in a circle. The man did not understand what was happening. The girl thought it was her alchemical magic at its highest level, and she would not let anyone overtake or stop her. The bully told him to wait, reminding him of his wounds. The girl pointed forward and said, "Fire." An explosion erupted around the man as the big guy screamed, and Nora watched in horror. Nornside is still smiling, happy but tired. Norn looked at the man on the ground, realizing she had gone too far, and asked whether he was still alive. Mudrin sat down beside the wounded man and said he was strong and alive, and Nora hid fearfully behind the fallen table. Norn, confused, told Nor that it did not seem the loser would apologize or ask the girl's forgiveness, and told her to go home. And as she walked down the street, Norn realized she and the owner were not equal. Mudrin swept the floor after the fight. Norn spread the cards on the table, told fortunes, and said the dragon on the ground showed the nature of the object. The inverted elf ancestor on the fire showed the state of mind, and the last card, a skeleton with a scythe, said the future lay in the air. Death. The girl held the card at the corner of her mouth and studied it. The alchemist's hand glowed with magic. The bandaged Grekov woke up. Someone lay on the floor under a blanket and, not noticing him wake, apologized, saying they had overdone it in the duel. Standing up, the girl said she was a skilled healer, and if he waited, she would be able to move in 3 hours. Grekov apologized for making her bail him out and promised to apologize to the slave later, saying he would stop swearing. The girl glared, denying it, convinced the man would kill her as soon as he could move. Grekov denied it, confused. Norn put on her gloves and said that people in this country are punished with 3 years in prison for attempted murder. The man did not understand what she was talking about, saying you cannot judge people for something they have not done yet, for which they have received consent. A spell produced a bow and a heart-tipped arrow in the alchemist's hands. The girl said she would judge him. The Greeks were surprised to see the bow and arrow appear out of nowhere. Norn looked at the man and asked him to let her save him. Grekov told the girl to stop, saying he was annoyed by the defeat, but not enough to challenge her again, and he cursed his helplessness. Mudrin was climbing the stairs toward them then. Norn watched the man in silence, then smiled and laughed, saying she could stare at the face of a frightened man who had long thought himself the strongest. Mudrin, puzzled, said he did not understand her tastes, and the girl's arrow struck the man in the chest. Grekov looked at the arrow, raised his clouded gaze, saw the girl and found her beautiful. The man in bandages burst into tears when Norn asked if Grekov would be her slave for 3 years, and he said he was ready to serve her his whole life. But the girl waved him off, saying 3 years would be enough for her. Putting the bow aside, the girl smiled and said that in 3 years she would train the man properly and then let him go, while Mudrin put one of the books back on the shelf. Cupid's bow made its target fall completely in love with the archer. Its owner could fire as many arrows as he wanted, but each effect lasted only 3 hits. When the 4th hit landed, the effect from the first arrow wore off. The bow could not kill. Back home, Nora went inside, put her bag on the table, and said she was home. Paracelsus stepped in with a tray, greeted the girl, and showed her what he held. The girl studied the tray and asked what it contained. The man said it was Coco's skin and showed no surprise. Paracelsus admitted he knew little, but after placing it in a cultivation kit prepared according to the recipe, Coco's skin began to grow. Paracelsus said Coco's body was strong and, with the right conditions, she would recover quickly, noting she would need a lot of primordial matter. He looked at Nora and said they needed to figure out how to put her together. Elflay lay motionless in her bed, as a small, bug-eyed monster crawled through her window and looked around. The monster looked around as the elf's hair wrapped around him and began to strangle him. The girl swallowed the monster. An eagle flew above the settlement at night. Burke spotted Glint below. The dog stood on its hind legs and signaled to the beastman. When the eagle landed, it asked how the dog was doing, and the dog wagged his tail and barked. Someone sat down beside the dog and asked what was happening, and the dog, unable to speak, began to write a letter. Puchko wrote that the humanoid fairy had disappeared and was probably captured, and that the owner was working with stinky elements. Burke asked what happened to Mogutan, and the dog pointed his paw forward and squeaked. The mole dug into the earth and twitched its nose. Dory of Mogutan probed the ground by extending small tentacles from his nose. Mogutan replied to the eagle in his own language and told Burke there was a basement that was very quiet, and touching it made him feel the forces were leaving. Burke understood and assumed the alchemist used the room to prevent information leaks. Burke ordered the beastmen to keep watching the mansion, but said they did not need to stay awake all the time because their sharp noses would still be useful, and if anything happened, they should synchronize the board and report it. The eagle flew away again. Flying along it, Burke silently warned his comrades not to overdo it. Meanwhile, the dog and the mole dug into the hole and slept soundly under the blanket. Nora lay next to Coco, thinking they could do nothing about Agnosia, and that Coco could not grasp Nora's motives. The boy's voice cut into the girl's thoughts, and asked if she was listening, and Nora asked what happened. Paracelsus happily replied that he did not fully understand whether it was related to the restoration, Coco's hair moved and held the elf's lock. Nora was surprised, and as the man sorted through Coco's hair, he thought the girl was gently stroking him and assumed she used her hair like insects and Tanny to compensate for blindness. The boy picked up a lock of hair, pleased, and said many insects were tangled and dried at the ends, adding that the girl caught small creatures around the room and ate them, and the young man, surprised by Coco's will to live, replied that she could move her hair too. The man looked confused and said there was an artificial fairy spy in her hair and they were being followed. Norn thought Agnoya was watching them through Coco's eyes, and maybe it was Norn. The girl felt a strong desire for violence in the Alchemist, but Norton, who followed the codes of law and even arranged a lynching, challenged a client to a duel instead of beating him and decided she was trying to remain human by following her own rules. The slave could learn what made Norn angry and use it to control her, but Nora had to attend her classes first. The man kept checking her hair, said a comb was needed to get the bugs out, then found an ant in the strands. Nora said nothing. That night in a strange house, Norn handed a document to a shaman and asked him to use it to make a magical contract. Bon took the document and replied that the girl's knowledge of shamanism meant she could enter into the contract on her own. Norn said only state-appointed or first-class shamans could cast slave contract spells. The shaman laughed and called her formal. The girl asked if he would do it, and he said he would take any job and asked for a slave. The shaman enchanted Grekov. A seal formed on the brute's chest, and the man prepared to enter a magical contract with the Norns. Later, back at home, the girl sat with her back to Grekov and spoke to him. Mudrin sat down beside her. Without looking up, the girl ordered the man to do his first task as a slave. Facing the man, Norn told him firmly to give her 100 lashes as hard as he could. Grekov trembled, holding the whip and saying she would not be able to withstand 100 of his blows. Norn bowed her head and replied that Mudrin was an expert healer and she would not die from the blows. Norn said that even if it was a duel, a fight without trial or investigation was unforgivable, punished by 10 lashes, and a repeat violation carried 10 times that punishment. The man wiped his brow and said he could not do it because he loved her. The girl said she understood, and that they both had to go through it since they would both feel the pain. Norn ordered him to hurry and hit her. Grekov, pity on his face, screamed and swung. A whip cracked through the room. In the corner under the stairs, the rabbit man huddled, knees pulled to his chest, shaking and covering his ears. Sunlight shone as Paracelsus said they had all the necessary materials and a fuse for emergencies, and that they could now begin making the bomb. A man asked Nora if she and Coco could stay at the hotel tonight. Nora was surprised by the request. Nora asked why, and the guy said he could finish the bomb himself, and if it exploded, everyone would suffer. The girl said it was more dangerous to stay alone, and he reminded her he had a safe point with him. So she said that if that was true, it did not matter where they were, and he tried to object. The girl dropped to the floor and said she would stay with the guy, adding that if he wanted to leave Coco at the hotel, he would have to carry her himself. Paracelsus, confused, asked her not to do that to him. The girl turned away, thinking the man had lost his presence of mind. Nora was sure her master did not value his life and was ready to make a bomb. But when he saw Nora and Coco in danger, he lost his composure, and she realized she had made him more likely to die, and that the same would have happened if anyone else had been in her place. An idea struck Nora, and she knew she wouldn't get another chance like it. The girl planned to win her owner's love while his self-esteem was low, then push him to work harder and build his confidence. Smiling, the girl realized that after her plan, all of Paracelsus's powers would be hers, and she laughed. The man called on his second gift. Holding a notebook, the boys changed into different clothes and covered their faces with scarves. The young man told them to start and warned she might run away at any time. Nora agreed. The girl stared at the notebook and remembered Norin's warning that some powers could be stolen depending on their type. Norris snatched the item from the man's hands with a quick movement. Paracelsus gave the girl a questioning look as Nora's vision started to swim. Norris saw an old man with a beard sitting on a throne, his robe covering only half his body, who greeted her, told her that hearing him meant she could steal someone's superpowers, and congratulated her. The man warned her to be careful if he stole them, because as soon as he finished speaking, 3 seconds would pass in the real world and the owner of the abilities would already try to take them back. I did not realize that this grandfather was the same one her master had mentioned. When the man introduced himself as a louse, the girl became confident in her guess. Alias pointed at the girl and said that, to be precise, it was a leftover thought in the thing she had stolen, and the flow of those thoughts had been sent into her consciousness. Then a man appeared in the notebook he held and explained how to use it. Nora learned about it from Paracelsus's explanations. He said the ability's previous owner came from another world and had two abilities. The man promised to reward the girl for stealing her ability and said he would answer any question she asked if he knew the answer. Nora asked who he was, able to do things no one she had ever met could do. The man laughed. The old man began to dissolve and said people learned magic from him. He feared they might start a fight, and it became clear he could throw things harder than the fiercest people. Alias said goodbye to Nora. Paracelsus waved his hand in front of the girl's face to call her as she held the sign. The girl woke, returned the magic item, and asked him to try to restore his powers. Paracelsus took the tablet and looked it over. Nora asked if he saw anything, and the boy said no. Nora said she became interested after the notebook was taken, that the power seemed to pass to her, and that the spirit alias explained how to use the object. Paracelsus was surprised by her words. Outraged that his notebook could be taken so easily, he was told to be careful and remembered to ask for an overview of the items being created. The slots were still filled. Nora asked whether her master was trying to create something, and her master agreed. When the young man arrived in this world, he said he tried to find the recipe for immortality, and among the many required ingredients, he found 100 he did not know how to get. The boy realized his power was useless when he filled his notebook with recipes for things that could not be made yet, leaving him with a useless stack of paper, so he became an alchemist's apprentice to collect other recipes. Paracelsus considered himself lucky to have that power, even when it only produced things he already knew, and he hoped the list would reset when the owner changed. Nora grabbed the notebook again and said she no longer saw images. The girl said the notebook kept its recipes even after changing owners, which meant it still had the ability to store a list of items it had created, and Nora glared at the guy while he looked at her questioningly. Norris said his recipes were too easy to steal and that the first pickpocket would take them right away. The young man apologized for his carelessness. The girl asked that from now on he summon the notebook quietly or hide it at the first sign of danger. Then she insisted they practice with it after making the bomb, and Paracelsus agreed to everything. Nora warned the boy not to mention his second power because Alias had already revealed it. The girl used her own attempt to steal his power as an example, saying that after taking the first gift, she could not take the second if the man hid it carefully, and if that power could kill her instantly, it would be easier than a problem. Nora warned the second power must be hidden more carefully because it is used so rarely the enemy will stay wary until the last moment. He understood her, and she returned the notebook. The man returned to work, telling them they needed to build a bomb and kneel toward the runes. Paracelsus's workshop floor was covered with artifacts. The man opened the window and stirred some air into the work area above the circle that sealed the magic. After that, the young man poured the required amount of oil and kneaded it until it turned to clay. Paracelsus attached the control panel and rolled it into a ball. The recipe strength determined the number of items, so he estimated everything by eye. Finally, he covered the sphere with paper to seal the magic, and once it reaches the required thickness, the first part will be ready. He then disposed of the unnecessary remains, using a modified spell circle topped with a metal plate. Removing the plate stopped the magic seal and returned the elements to normal. The young man flipped the board and activated a circle of liberation that destroyed all the elements on it. This had to be done carefully. After repeating the same steps with fire and water, they fitted the magic-blocking casing, and the bomb was ready, and Paracelsus suffered a minor burn while working with the fire. The man told the girl to pack the bomb because it needed to be wrapped tightly in paper that blocked magic for safety during transport. Work went on, and the young man kept making bombs. Nora said she would take them to the room and left. The girl realized the news had not been good lately, and sighed. Walking forward, the girl thought Elias had planned to take the gift away to see how they would fight, and to view the man as a child watching the battle of insects. Nora knew hiding was not an option, but wanted an escape route because their chances of survival were small. The girl decided making a contract with Nora was not a bad idea. The girl understood that the contract would keep her safe, but she still had doubts. Regarding Norn's nature, her main problem was Alias, whose boredom might make him attack them. Dismissing trivial questions, she should have asked one that would give her an advantage in their childish game. The girl laid out the bombs on the paper with runes. Nora burst into Paracelsus's room, screaming and calling his name, and he answered. The joyful girl said that after meeting the spirit, she kept thinking about his divine appearance and way of thinking, which made the man seem amazing. The boy looked at Nora with concern as she said Alias had techniques and gave them to people. Paracelsus decided the girl had gone crazy, then realized she was up to something. The guy said he also thought Elias was cool, thinking the game would be boring unless she could watch the process. The girl kept talking, and there had been a plan to add peeping powers. But the problem appeared when it was activated and she realized it turned on only at the moment of use. Nora realized that if she kept praising the spirit, he might notice and give her something, so she kept praising him, and the guy agreed, puzzled. He stood up from his work, sighed, and said they were finished, and that a man from Ellenbeck's shop would come tomorrow to collect the bombs, which had been made too quickly so the men could not get down to business at once and grew nervous, cursing that she had annoyed them, and Nora would not have objected to the bombs being at home, in which case he would have made them right away. Paracelsus decided to check on Coco's progress and tell the girl in advance. In the elf's room, the guy sat down, and when the girl opened her eyes, he found it strange that they did not focus. Paracelsus believed agnosia could not cause any eye problems, but he knew that at this rate the eyes would die and become useless. Nor did I think Coco was simply rejecting them. Nora decided she would not accept anything from the person who did this to her, because no one knew what the girl had hidden in those things. He hoped nothing would show in his eyes and asked Nora to go out with him for a while. Standing on Paracelsus Street, the monster grabbed the jelly, and the man asked whether Alias had told her anything else, but the girl refused to answer. The boy decided to explain his theory that if the spirit gave people strength for battle, then his strength was for that too. The young man doubted it. Elias was unhappy about sending the boy to this world because the hero had not chosen combat abilities, so it seemed the world already had enough people with abilities. The man kept saying Elias might have other plans for people, and Nora smiled. The girl asked how well the young man remembered the catalog, and he hesitated because he was in a hurry. Nora asked him to describe his abilities in more detail. He described 3 abilities: heart reading that allowed someone to read thoughts, a wizard's book that recorded first-class spells, and an entrance to the mirror world that only its owner could enter. He answered vaguely that he would hardly remember everything now because there was so much, and Nora understood. The girl said that even if many people had powers, others might still want the guy's abilities, so they had to believe they could resist their enemies. He suggested they think about it now, smiling. Twitch agreed, but preferred to do it in her room. Paracelsus said, confused, that the two of them could come up with something faster and that having someone who could read thoughts was tiresome. The girl said they should think it over in private, discuss it tomorrow, and wish the owner good night. And the young man said goodbye to her. Standing at her bedside, Nora closed her eyes. Nora managed to separate her spirit, and even the astral projection was surprised by her method, saying ordinary people would lose consciousness while Nora stayed awake, and she never admitted she had trained to use the technique for eavesdropping. The girl asked whether they could read her thoughts if she used the astral plane, and the monster dad behind her head said he didn't know, but that they could kill her if she couldn't move. Nora said this was where the monster would come in, and asked if he could inhabit her body. Monster Daddy understood and fulfilled her request. Monster Daddy looked at the girl's hands and body, and said he had forgotten how hard it was to be in a body. Nora, appearing as a projection, warned him to watch his words, and told him to take over her body at the slightest danger. Nora said it was important they practice doing it quickly and naturally, and warned that during this time the girl would be thinking of a plan. So the monster ordered them to rely on the monster father to act as he always did. Nora said when they met the mind reader they could confuse him this way and catch him by surprise. The father monster noted the girl had cleverly devised a plan, and the projection said this would guarantee they met the reader. Paracelsus sat on the floor and reviewed the recipe for making weapons. He realized a simple weapon would be useless in battle against a skilled opponent, though arming himself wouldn't hurt. Paracelsus collapsed to the floor in confusion and did not know what to do. That morning the girl drew on the ground and asked Paracelsus to do the opposite of what she said. Nora drew a circle to mark it as her territory. Nora asked not to go into the circle, hoping the guy would go instead. Paracelsus, lost in thought, entered the circle. After she asked how he felt, he said he felt disgusted after entering a place where he was not invited, and she said that would be the basis for the curse. Nora said she had cast a cursed circle that amplified abomination to make it hard for enemies to enter. Explained that if an enemy entered, the curse would damage their mind and body and could become life-threatening if fueled by a strong emotion. Added that the curse could not act on its own, but was hard to counter, and Paracelsus listened attentively to the girls. Nora said their enemies might be shamans and promised to tell them more about the curse later. The man agreed. Resolute, Paracelsus looked at the girl, called her name, and she responded. Taking Nora's hands, he promised to protect her and grow stronger. And Nora, embarrassed and confused, agreed when guests suddenly arrived at the house. Mudrin approached the men with a rabbit. Paracelsus greeted them, the beastmen echoed the greeting, and he said he had been waiting for them and that the bombs were ready. The rabbit was surprised that the master had made them in 2 weeks, and Paracelsus laughed in confusion. It tapped the bomb wrapped in a rag, listened, and said the quality was excellent. The rabbit apologized for taking the man's time and said he'd need 2 trips to carry the bombs. The spider said they should wait because he needed to talk to Norn. Paracelsus had already changed clothes in the house and asked for a notebook. He placed the notebook behind his front and said the size was great. Nora entered the room and asked what kind of outfit it was. He said he remembered a good piece of fabric lying around and decided to make a suit for self-defense. The guy replied that such a suit does not measure temperature, and also changes how one deals with heat. Paracelsus prepared a similar suit for Nora. The girl thanked the guy but reminded him not to forget to rest. The man pointed to his chest and said he'd made a mithril plate to cover the vulnerable spot, with a holder underneath for a notebook. Nora took a closer look at the plate. Nora decided to ask what the man wanted from Norn. Paracelsus said he wanted her to hide who made the product. She looked at the young man and warned him to be careful on his way, and he smiled. Paracelsus grabbed the cart, surprising Mudren, and asked the man whether he was actually carrying bombs, and the young man replied that a bit of exercise would not hurt him. Nora watched from the sidelines as the monster father asked whether she would let the boy go that easily. Inside, she told herself she could do nothing anyway, and wanted to prove how far her master was from killing anyone. Yet deep down, Nora worried about her master. Nora put her hand on her chest and pulled out a hair. The father monster asked who it was. Nora said he had done it to the Norns. Her face hardened with anger. Nor said that if the guy did not return, she would hide and cast a deadly curse on Norn. The monster looked at her in fear. The monster father asked her not to switch with him when the girl was next to Paracelsus, because he did not know what face to show him. Nora told him not to complain, because he was now part of her. In the city square, Paracelsus stood beside Fant and threw up, saying he'd never had to move so much before. Mudrins helped him. The rabbit suggested leaving the man there, but Modrina said they should protect him. Gasping for breath, the young man decided he needed to train his endurance. A voice addressed him, and Paracelsus turned his attention forward. When the fountain rejected him, a skull's face appeared, revealing the boy had powers. Paracelsus panicked and tried to scream when he was suddenly dragged under the water. The rabbit heard the sound and went to the fountain to ask what Paracelsus was doing. Mudrin asked what was wrong as the rabbit examined the fountain, and the rabbit said he had heard a splash of water, but had not seen the man. Mudrin told the rabbit to move aside, dipped her finger in the water, and licked it. The girl said it tasted like dead human flesh. The rabbit asked if it was Paracelsus's taste, and Mudrin said its owner had been dead for several days, called the situation Chair Pavets, and ordered her to tell the mistress everything, so the rabbit understood and ran away. Mudrin realized that if anything happened to the man, Nora would blame them. So she wrote on the tablet warning her comrades that Paracelsus had disappeared. Paracelsus lay on the ground as a silhouette stood across from him. A man with a skeletal face introduced himself as the Dark Knight and, holding a sword, ordered the boy to answer his questions. Horror hit Paracelsus when he saw the man in the cloak. Dark Knight said the boy carried gifts from another world, and the young man agreed. The man aimed his sword at Paracelsus and ordered him to reveal his powers and hand them over if he wanted to leave this place alive. Paracelsus looked back. After falling into the fountain, He noticed everything go quiet and people disappear and realized he had slipped into another world. Duck Knight laughed, and Paracelsus realized the water was only a moving surface controlled by the man standing opposite him. Paracelsus thought one of Dark Knight's abilities wasn't for fighting, wasn't sure it could match his other powers, and analyzed what the movement power might be. The young man asked what guarantee he had that he would return alive if he gave up his powers, and the man said he was stupid and there was no guarantee. Dark Knight said that, given the boy's situation, it was appropriate for him to trade his powers for life, and that he would decide based on the boy's behavior. The young man reproached Dark Knight for his conduct. The man trembled, said he did not know him, ordered him sent back to the previous world, and threatened to turn the enemy to coal, and Dark Knight answered that the man's power came from the recipes. Paracelsus was horrified by his enemy's knowledge and could not understand how the enemy had learned it. Duck Knight reminded the boy that he had prepared medicine for his dying grandmother, and then took out a notebook with no hidden motive. The man jabbed the other with a sword, insisting he could not turn him into coal, and asking what his second power was. Paracelsus tried to shield his head from the enemy's attacks. The young man seized the sword and said he could not give up his strength, but he proposed a deal. Paracelsus advised doing everything possible for a person, provided it would not be used for evil. The young man asked to be taken out of this place because if he were killed now, the enemy would gain nothing. Duck Knight laughed, asked if he was hoping for a loved death, and summoned an army of zombies from the ground. Turning around, he found himself facing the horde of zombies. Earth's rebels reached for the young man as he fought them off. Zombies knocked him down and tried to chase him. He screamed in pain that he was dying, and a man replied they were only playing with him so far. Dark Knight replied that if he did not obey him, they would really start on the guy. Paracelsus was able to stand as the army halted and the enemy demanded he give them his powers. Crying, the boy said he would obey him. When the man ordered him to get the notebook, the other said it was already in his pocket, took out a coin, and asked him to keep it for himself. The Dark Knight asked what it was, and the man held up a magnet, saying it was a communication device given to new members when they joined the Association of Alchemists. A young man threw her into the plywood while chanting what he was doing, and the man asked what would happen next. The coin dropped into the water. The boy ducked and said the word steam. Everyone froze. The fountain burst apart. The man ducked just in time while everyone else was thrown in different directions. Paracelsus rested his hand on the fountain while the others and the drops of water fell to the ground. Paracelsus rose from his seat, surprised that everything worked out, and thinking that following the recipe could turn water and valerian into steam. Staggering forward, he thought Dark Knight wasn't trying to kill him, but he managed to take him out of the game and hoped he hadn't died, because then the young man could remain in this world forever. Dizziness from the explosion caused him to collapse. Inside the house, Nora sat at the table eating when the bell rang to announce guests. The girl opened the door, thinking Paracelsus had left something behind. Lexus stood in front of Nora, shielding her and wishing her a good day. Nora stood stunned. The girl mentally ordered the monster father to change and entered the astral plane to buy, not expecting Elias to arrive so soon. Earlier, the girl told her father about the mind reader, saying he could only have a surface-level understanding of other people's thoughts. The monster father asked why she believed that. The girl replied that otherwise the reader could instantly strike the first blow, depriving Alias of the pleasure of the game. Nora assumed the spirit was open to flattery, so he could visit them soon. The girl began planning a strategy in advance, believing the old man had a similarly complex mind. Father was outraged by the constant assumptions. Nora told her father to think only the best of Elias. When the girl asked about the old man's strength to show interest and learn about him and his knowledge, the father, confused, asked if Nora wanted to kill him. The girl said this was one option. Their priority was to learn his words and then expand on them. They said the father should not think about it. She replied that if unnecessary thoughts came into his head, they should be exchanged immediately. The father asked what he should do if he asked to spend the night with him. She told him not to accept the offer right away, reminded him of his value, and said he could act as he wished after some time. The monster father refused to believe he would have to share the pastel with the spirit. The girl said closeness could create a bond and reveal the enemy's weaknesses. He could not do such a thing in his own daughter's body. Nora replied that he might not have done it, but because of his weakness his daughter might die, and awkwardness meant nothing in life. Back in the present, the father, now in his daughter's body, greeted Alias with all due honors. The girl asked what Elias was doing there. Alias said he had a free minute and decided to go to her. When asked if she was surprised, the girl's father said he was amazed by the guest's visit and laughed. Stepping back from the door, she said she was helping with tea and invited them in. Nora spoke from the astral and flooded her father with a message to treat the old man with hospitality. Father forced a smile. At Alan Bick's magic shop, Norn said Pochico found a walking corpse near Paracelsis's house that was holding flesh wrapped in linen. The girl sat down and unfolded the canvas to show the dead man's hand, saying it was a fragment of him, and Mudrin asked if there was any way to control the dead. Norn said it existed, but the technique was extremely complex, was often blocked without people knowing, and was a forbidden curse. She looked at Norton's hand and said the more crowded the city, the harder the magic was to use, so this kind of magic was unusual. And since Paracelsus was there, it was likely the work of the gift's owner. The girl ordered the Zairman to stop following and search for everyone except Colic. Barrow accepted the order. Norn grew worried and thought about Paracelsus. Paracelsus lay beside the ruined fountain. He woke and tried to stand, wiping the dirt from his face. The young man saw the Dark Knight nearby and could not understand why the Dark Knight did not remember his powers. Suddenly, someone grabbed his leg. Paracelsus fell from the zombie's grasp again, and Dark Knight rose among the dead, saying he had destroyed the corpses he had spent so long collecting. The older man stared at the young man and said he would never forgive him. Dark Knight ordered the hero's leg torn off, which stunned Paracelsus and filled him with fear. His zombie's skull lay a few centimeters from the young man's leg. The dead man's skull caught fire, shocking the man. Two girls behind the house asked the man if he was okay and called him over. Paracelsus crawled toward them, then suddenly fled when the Dark Knight ordered the zombies to follow him. One girl began casting a spell while the other braced to hold the line. The mage launched a fireball at the zombie. A ball of fire magic grew larger and flew forward. The ball destroyed a zombie next to the main enemy. As the three ran, the man turned back and the woman with a sword and shield shouted they didn't have time to look around. Using her sword, the girl defended herself, pushed the zombie back, and pierced him. The boys ran and Paracelsus went to ask who they were. The man asked for an answer and was immediately silenced. A scream from the Dark Knight came from behind. By shouting after them that they couldn't get out without him, the man had already defeated them. The heroes ran to this castle. Paracelsus sighed, exhausted from running, and felt sweat on his face. A man cast a warning spell that lit up the sky, and the other girls shouted they were back as they began lowering the ladder to them. The girl let the boy go ahead and told him to get up. He obeyed while she held the approaching horde back. A boy approached two girls, one aiming at the zombie, and they were surprised when he greeted them, while the short blonde led him to the door and the other shouted for the others to get up. Paracelsus went down the stairs with the girls and looked around while the men went into the corridor and walked forward in silence. Goldie, a young mage, introduced herself as a clever mage. Paracelsus introduced himself and shook her hand. Goldie then introduced the girl beside her as her knight, Sylvia. Sylvia said she had been an ordinary, unemployed city girl before and greeted him. The mage introduced the others, saying the archers were Violet and Rose. The other two were Lilia and Dahlia, and although there were more people, only those 6 were ready for combat. Goldie said they were kidnapped to fulfill Dark Knight's dream. Paracelsus asked what she meant, and she said the man dreams of a heron. Goldie pressed close and said he had tried to wipe off the week's makeup and had made a mistake choosing her, adding that she was strong and beautiful, while the young man argued about the magician's magic seal and her lack of it. Goldie asked why he disappeared here and what he talked about with the Dark Knight. Goldie ordered him to tell the truth while her knight drew her sword and pointed it at the guy. Pressed to the blade, the boy said the spirit had given him 2 gifts, and Dark Knight wanted to steal them while boasting of his powers. Afraid of the girls, the boy lied a little. Sylvia replied that if he was left alive, the Dark Knight could become stronger and suggested killing him, and the young man backed away in fear. Goldie said it could have been done, but since the man had the ability, he could have gotten rid of them himself and been more favorably disposed toward him. Paracelsus said he was not their enemy, and that if they let him join them, he would help defeat the Dark Knight. Sylvie stood guard. Sylvia stomped on the man and struck him with her shield. Paracelsus lay on the ground, and the girl, pointing a sword at him, demanded to know who he thought he was. Sylvia said they had been surviving in those conditions for a year, helped by the locals and by people who had already died after stepping on the man with their foot. Still screaming, the girl asked how he could help them if he had just been saved from a zombie, and the man apologized. Sylvia put down her sword and left. Goldie apologized to Paracelsus. The girl asked how they could get through the dark night. The young man said that if his two powers were joined, he would find a way and wipe the blood from his face. The girl asked for more about the second force, but the man refused, calling it his main trump card. Goldie pressed again, and Paracelsus said that if revealing it was required to join them, he would rather fight the zombies alone. The girl gave in and, as she left, offered to join the fight, saying that although he was still under surveillance, she would bring him food without having to go to the second floor. Paracelsus silently watched the girl leave. As night fell, he sat on a bench and thought about the lies he had told for their good, and realized that if he were buried somewhere, the girls would see him as an enemy. The guy thought he was screwed and shouldn't lie so much in front of people. Covering his face in frustration, Nora's projection appeared beside him and said he'd done the right thing. He replied that Nora would say that, remembering the girl. Seeing the girl in front of him, the man jumped up in surprise and squealed. She told him to be quiet and explained she was only in his mind. The girl said she could appear like this because of the real Nora. The guy thanked her and asked how she was, and she said she only knew what her master knew. Paracelsus lifted his head and hoped Nora was all right. Meanwhile, the girl sat at home, naked, trembling and covered in blood, growling. A few hours before the battle, a rabbit darted through the alleys toward Paracelsus's house. The rabbit wondered why he'd been running so long to find the boy's house when he should have reached it by now. Alias then told the girl about his abilities, saying he had an insoluble barter and an all-destroying ray, and claimed nothing could be stronger. The man explained that when two forces collide in a fight, it becomes very interesting, saying he tried with all his strength to crush his opponent, and that it was simply exciting. The girl tried to steady her trembling body and kept smiling. Nora's projection noticed the old man had been telling his 6 stories for an hour, and her father listened so intently that she felt she couldn't do the same. The girl said the idea of giving people from another world powers and pulling aliens into their world was a good one. The man heard the compliment, and Nora agreed, wanting to please Elias. The girl said they had not invented magic, but that Alias let them use it, and even called him their progenitor. And Alias liked the praise and said the girl had read his thoughts. The man spoke about human limits like fear, talent, ethics, and imagination, and said he had originally given people unlimited magic for freedom and to create and destroy worlds. Alias was disappointed by how stupid people were and wished there were more competitions. The girl asked Elias if he knew about curse magic, saying she was a shaman and had read that magic and curses were different. The man said he knew about those role-playing games and that people make up stupid rules for themselves. Kurz called it nonsense, which made Nora's father so angry that he challenged the spirit to a duel. A man watched the girl with interest while a projection silently observed the scene. The girl said his inner strength was great and that she could not compare to him as a person. Father and Nora's body explained that he wanted to show that curses should not be underestimated and could match a man's strength. The girl asked for permission to be hit once. Ali asked what the girl wanted for winning. She said praise would be enough, and the man laughed. Norris's projection was surprised at how skillfully her father controlled his anger and politely turned the situation to his advantage. Nor did they understand that in the current situation they could survive, that if they won, they could kill the spirit. And they were amazed at the adult's treachery. The man accepted her proposal and said that if she failed, she would have to listen to his chatter forever, and he raised a shield. Alias warned the barrier would block everything until he himself allowed it. The man's fingers lit up when he raised them, and he said it was a beam, warning that if she did not give in, he would point it at her and incinerate her. She accepted it. Pointing out that no one would listen if he incinerated her, the heroine made him realize he was wrong. The spirit shifted tactics and said it would use a needle from catalog number 43 to imprint her magic for 24 hours, and that even curses would be useless without magic. Fear made her step back as she asked what kind of power it was. Alias said trying to run through the needle was useless. A needle pierced the girl's chest. The girl fell from the chair and jerked in pain. Elias laughed and said that would be enough for victory, then looked at her. Anxious, the man asked how the girl felt and whether she was in much pain. The girl sat up and giggled. Father, speaking through Nora's body, said he had drunk tea the man had prepared, talked with him for hours, and agreed to a duel, thereby establishing a connection. A needle pierced Alias's chest, leaving him surprised by the magic in the ceiling. The men did not understand how the girl could use his power, and assumed she had used it before he attacked her. The girl replied that the power was only a lease, and he had attacked himself. The spirit did not understand anything. The girl said she had at first thought the curse would not affect Alias since Alias was a being separate from a physical shell, but she still felt strong feelings for the spirit, although she was still scared. The girl said he had been at least a little afraid of the curse, and he used the sealing power to neutralize her immediately, which made him predictable and allowed him to strike with the curse. The man said she had tried hard. The girl added that he would not be able to remove his magic now. The heroine pointed at Elias and said that until he let the magic go, the needle could not be removed, laughing that it was his much-praised limitless magic. The father said both the beam and the barrier were powerful skills, like the skill that grants other skills. The man started to look nervous. Father said these 3 skills alone were enough for many tasks and that he could handle the enemy, telling Nora not to panic. Quoting Elias, the girl said humans were pathetic, never using their strength fully and only able to break down. The man opened his mouth in fear. Her expression darkened as she cursed that a man could do nothing now. The girl stood in an attack pose and prepared to jump, and the man was glad the skills she had activated earlier worked, but she did not understand what had changed about her or how her appearance had altered. Alias pulled a knife from his robe and tried to cut the girl as she jumped up. Nora's clothes vanished and she got stuck on the ceiling. The man, surprised by her jump, told her not to jump so high. Slowly, the girl turned her head 120 degrees toward the man to scare him and make him lose focus. The girl had another eye, and although the man's attack bounced back at him, he struck again because her curse reflects any blow, yet he still tried to kill her with a knife. And Nora did not know if he was a fool or could not die even if cut in 2, so it was not worth attacking him while she had the chance. Dodging the attack, Nora judged the man could not use the needle's new magic, but believed he still had the old spell she needed to find, and she knew her limit was the needle's duration, and that if the spirit activated the barrier she would die. So she snatched the earphone from his ear. Taking the item, the girl saw a projection of the man she had seen earlier when she took the notebook from its owner, and she said this was how she would die. Nora asked the projection to send her back faster, and the man agreed, shrinking the whole return to 1 second. She hid behind the fireplace, knowing it would have been the end if he had not been hallucinating. The herbs the girl mixed into the tea and the incense lit at the tea party revealed another one of hers to the man, which helped her hide. Nora had not expected this to work, but the needle left her weakened, so Alias gave her a chance and she still had to win. She knew the incense and tea would stop working soon. The double helped with the attack, but Nora did not know when the old man could remove the needle, so she had to attack directly. Nora accepted that the spirit had existed before people, saw it as a parasite that would bring misfortune to its host, and resolved to end it by murdering the man. Nora struck the man in the face, silently apologizing to her father for dragging him in and begging for more help. Her father said he was happy to help and, even in death, would bare his fangs and let the inner beast tear the enemy apart. The double struck the man again, this time with her foot. The double lunged at the spirit and scratched its face, but the man still managed to swing his blade. The happy old man said he had hit the target. The double lost his right arm and had a cut across his chest. The accomplice shouted to Nora that the pair would attack, which surprised the man. Norm took Alias's hand. Moving quickly, the girl drove the blade into the man's chest, and he sighed. The spirit entered her seal. Nora winced in pain, had her father pull his hand away from her hair, then went inside and said it was spacious. A part of Nora warned her not to touch the slave curse. Part of the whole said that all the walls of this room were made of leather and pulled out a small part of the cuts, and the father said he hoped that was enough and asked if she was okay, and she agreed. Nora asked if he could master it, and the father said he could and climbed inside the skin. A blurred shape emerged from the burrow, and part of the burrow replied that by the time the battle began, she would put the things nearby so that at the right moment her father could move into it. Her father said he would act as bait for her, and Nora told her parent to practice with him. Back in the present, Nora took the blade and re-entered the man's projection, but the spirit said she had urgent business and sent her back. The girl returned. My father warned her to be on guard, and you said the sandal would have to be thrown away too. An enemy lay on the floor with a hole through his chest. Nora swung her blade. The father said Ilias's legs were fine and asked if she would cut them again, and Nora replied it would be necessary just in case. The girl cut the man's body into 5 parts. Exhausted and breathless, Nora took Ilias's head. The girl started casting a spell so the man's soul could rest and not turn into an evil spirit. I want to get rid of the body as soon as possible. Nora tried to calm her body and soul quickly, but her father's insistence that no murderer would bury someone so quickly made peaceful sleep less likely. The battered, severed head of the old man spoke, saying he refused to sleep. The girl backed away, and the man said he hated sleeping more than anything because something interesting could happen while he slept and it would be sad to miss it, so he quickly jumped away from the talking head. The old man smiled and said he hated anyone who told him to sleep. Feeling glad, he told the girl she was a good girl and cut his neck. The spirit erected a barrier. The man smiled, clarified the girl's remark about his 3 skills, which he had used for only a century, and replied that 2 would be enough, then asked for the secret catalog of cheat skills and the ordinary catalog so he could pick any power for himself. The old man's body began to heal, and 4 tentacles grew from his head. He explained that the secret cheat catalog contained another skill, a restorative device. This skill let the spirit form a new body for itself, with a puppet-like doll at its center. Frozen with horror, she heard the man say his magic was endless compared to humans. The spirit returned to his original body and grew to 3 times the girl's size, saying he could do the same. The man said he had removed the barrier for her and suggested they attack in turns, and they said she should strike first. Nora understood this was the end and she would not win. Nora began to think that if she attacked him with a knife, he would simply recover. And even if he tempered her attack, he would still recover and eventually die, leaving only her and her father. I replied that he did not have the strength to control her body, and he apologized to his daughter. And the enemy said that although he was invincible, he was afraid of being wounded but now assured he would fight as he should. Feeling sad, the man asked if the girl had given up and said there was nothing he could do about it, then waved his hand and told her he had bought it for her. A rabbit suddenly came to the girl's aid, swung up to the ceiling, pressed against it, and hit the man. The rabbit hit the enemy in the face, surprising the girl. Nora tried to remember the rabbit's name, and he said it was Tutori, adding that he had heard a bit of the situation from afar and asked what kind of creature it was, and Nora replied, it was a monster. Nora told the rabbit that only what the man allows can pass the barrier, and even a slight injury will trigger the device in his chest to immediately restore his defenses, so we would die from his light beam attack, and the spirit saw his great growth and then weakened. Wiping his face, the man resisted the beast man and said it was just an alchemical mistake by humanity. The enemy pointed at the rabbit and said he should be ashamed to live because he had absorbed the worst from people and animals. You repeat that he was disgusted. The man suddenly remembered he had come to deliver a message to the burrow and that if they survived he would pass it on. The rabbit insisted the Alan Vick shop was not the burrow's enemy and vowed to prove it by getting her out of here, even if he had to give his life. The enemy mocked his trembling paws and told him to stop pretending to be a man. He was not surprised to be afraid since he was a herbivore. Eating grass and fearing strong predators made running away fit his appearance. The rabbit suddenly jumped back. Tutori admitted he was trash because he couldn't hit a rabbit like that. Alias tried to hit the rabbit with the beam again. The enemy kept firing the beam while the rabbit jumped, and it felt almost exhausted with no chance of winning. The man noticed the rabbit's speed change and asked whether he was going too fast as the beast man jumped around the room. Tutori remembered a conversation with Norm Coe, who said beastmen have abilities neither ordinary people nor beasts have. And in Norm's case, the power surfaced during a battle with a strong opponent when he was afraid. Tutori thought only about fleeing and fear. No longer jumping, the rabbit had surrounded the enemy. The rabbit remembered how delighted he had been by his natural gift and thanked the alchemists who made it, and Norn replied that it was only a recent discovery and not everyone had it. In the fight, the rabbit bolted at incredible speed from fear. Tutori shouted at this monster, urging them to see their potential. The enemy said he could not be beaten that way, since no matter how fast he moved his barrier, no one could get through. As the enemy tried to speak, the rabbit broke through the barrier and, guided by a spirit from the past, struck him in the face, causing his eye to fall out. The beastman's cunning surprised the enemy. She saw the man's body start to regenerate, and cutting off his head wasn't enough. Nora shouted to Totori to aim for the body, since if it was him, everything would work out. The beastman ripped the man's heart from his chest and knocked the magical item out as well. The girls claimed the blade. I did not cut the heart or the magic item with a sudden motion. Wishing the monster dead, the girl waved the artifact away. Exhausted, the heroes collapsed to the floor. The room lay in ruins. The girl stood up, walked over to the beastman, and asked whether he was okay. A beam from behind sliced Nora's hand, and she spun around. Horror drove the girl into despair. The enemy transformed completely and said he wouldn't die without the artifact because he was immortal. The Lord had wounded Nora. In great pain and losing strength, she collapsed to the floor. Blood seeped slowly, leaving trails as the world around her dimmed and felt strange and bare. The monster screamed that the girl could not use her magic to shoot arrows, and despair and helplessness made it hard for him to think, so he attacked, biting his opponents before resting a little. The father shouted, telling Nora to move faster, and his heart dropped in sudden fear, while right above them splinters began to fall from the ceiling. At first quiet and tiny, then becoming a clear warning of danger. Coco had taken a monstrous form, ready to unleash her fury on her enemies while protecting those who cared for her. A blazing eye burst from the girl. She tightened every muscle, gathered the last of her strength, and drove her hair straight into Hermes' chest, piercing him. Completely exhausted, she dropped from the ceiling and lost consciousness while still in midair. Father knew Coco's soul was trapped inside, not by a simple curse, but by unbridled anger that had become something far worse, and that force kept her body moving against all odds. The cup slid off the table, flew through the air, and hit the tiled floor with a loud crash, cracking along its edge. The maid asked Agnosia if anything important had happened, and Agnosia said she had only one true friend. The maid thought of her mistress and said the mistress's friend was a poor girl. The lady said the girl was too kind, because even when people used her for selfish reasons, she still laughed. But the girl said one should be angry at bad people. Every day, she prayed earnestly for the girl, asking the gods to teach her to fight back against her attackers. Finally, after many years, her prayers were heard. The maid came forward and warmly congratulated her mistress on this significant event. Agnosh sat there, barely holding back tears of joy, because after a long time her friend finally noticed a flaw in herself and for the first time felt real anger at someone else's actions. Totori watched the strange events with forced calm, decided there was some unknown monster in front of him, and did not understand the nature of what was happening. Nora told the guests that the mysterious creature was their ward Coco, whom they had taken in and saved, but no one could explain why she was undergoing such horrific changes, even though it was clear she was unlikely to become their enemy. Tori carefully bandaged the girl's severed hand, told her she could get full treatment a little later, then sighed and said he wanted to free her from her suffering. But an important detail made the situation harder. The rabbit took her hands gently and in a soft voice told her not to worry, explaining that Paracelsus had been the victim of a treacherous kidnapping. He urged the girl to first regain her strength and recover physically and mentally, before promising to tell her all the details of the mysterious incident. Nora shouted Coco's name as loud as she could, hoping Coco could hear her, since the girl sat motionless and could barely move. The slaves screamed hysterically that their master had been kidnapped and begged him to come to her aid at once, while Tutori tried to stop her, urging her to be patient and wait for the right moment to act. The elf who had startled the rabbit with sudden movements regained her composure and moved briskly toward the inviting call. Nora jumped onto the legs of the transformed Coco and asked the frightened guest to hurry and lead them to where the owner had been kidnapped. The father's spirit remained trapped alone in an unfamiliar body, filled with deep anxiety and loss. Paracelsus tried to imagine how Norison would react to the news and pictured the thoughts and feelings that would overwhelm her in that difficult situation. Fake Nora said seriously that they now faced two tough problems, each needing an urgent solution. The first problem was the zombies, she said, because if the Dark Knight could control corpses, he could keep making more and his power would never run out. So it was better to conserve strength and hide. And the young man realized the situation was hopeless. The second problem is the mirror's power. Even if somehow all the zombies are defeated or neutralized, the main threat will remain the same. If the Dark Knight escapes in those desperate circumstances, the others will stay prisoners in the mirror world indefinitely, since he cannot escape if he finds their abilities useless, and even if he does escape, they will remain locked away unless he chooses to free them. Paracelsus wondered why their opponent did not decide the outcome by sending an endless stream of zombies to increase pressure from the undead. False Nora told her guests that the enemy might have their own reasons for holding off on such a plan. Dark Knight said he wanted the boy's skills and told them to let the boy enjoy this world among the zombies until he agreed to give them up, warning he would return in 3 months. And Nora remembered those words from his first meeting with the owner. The boy assumed the enemy could not directly control the zombies, and seeing the enemy as distant or from another world, he first wanted to find out why they wanted his skills. And it sounded like a threat at the time, but he understood any decision carried risks. The interlocutor stressed not rushing toward the enemy with cries of readiness, but keeping your reserve power hidden and using it only at the decisive moment to increase the chances of success. Paracelsus confirmed he has no plans to stay here forever. The young woman's deep wisdom struck him, and her measured words gave him long-awaited relief, confidence, and inner peace, easing his growing anxiety and worry. Nora said modestly that she had only briefly occupied a small corner of her master's mind, and that the truly brilliant ideas were entirely his, and these sincere words left him embarrassed but genuinely happy and warm. He quickly realized the illusion was not a real girl, but a reflection of his own desires and hopes. Realizing he had heard only pleasant words from his imagination, he felt awkward and deeply ashamed of his overreaction. Nora calmly said the owner simply needed warm words of support from someone close, and there is nothing shameful in that desire. Paracelsus looked again at his interlocutor and decided to trust only his own judgment and common sense. The girl concluded that Nora had only 3 modest abilities within her master, sometimes appearing before him, easing his suffering or painlessly ending his life to stop his pain. The interlocutor stated firmly that her role was just 3 simple actions, and after asking them to remember these limits carefully, added a polite, slightly concerned remark. The slave felt a quiet joy knowing that no matter what trials came, she would remain inseparable, and in life's most tragic moments, just before death, she could appear before her loved one and give him a final glance. Sadly, she said that even the real Nora did not get that privilege and vanished into space without a trace. At first, he was visibly nervous, excitement and anxiety building inside him, but he soon pulled himself together, took a deep breath, and resolved to calmly and steadily analyze what was happening. He realized the inner gardens had been turned into a farm with ideal conditions for growing plants and animals, so the castle's residents rarely had to leave and provided all the resources they needed. The soil there was surprisingly soft, perfectly prepared for young shoots and showing that someone had been skillfully and responsibly tending the plants, creating ideal conditions for their growth. Before coming here, Paracelsus worked in the fields beside his father, helping to farm the land. After a full day of hard labor, his muscles were so exhausted that even simple movements became difficult and painful. Keeping that in mind, he considered how muscles tire and how to restore the body. Paracelsus was struck by the range of undead creatures, including skeletons and ghosts, and concluded that only zombies appeared here because the owner's skill was limited. Zombies, despite rotten flesh, retain muscles and basic brain structures, so they are cheaper to control than skeletons, which need extra magic to move and interact with the world. He figured 1 page of his recipe was exhausting, so controlling many zombies would be extremely difficult, and there might be a way to disable their muscles without much energy, but his ideas proved ineffective and unsafe for living people. His gaze dropped sharply, and he peered wearily at something that had suddenly caught his attention. A handful of earth appeared in his palm, and Paracelsus lit up with happiness, then began turning around eagerly, peering out and studying the surrounding area. The young man studied Goldie closely, and asked where in the building he could find the darkest, dampest spot suitable for growing crops that needed special conditions. Finding the perfect place that met all the required conditions filled him with genuine joy. Surprised, the girl looked at the young man and asked what had caused him such intense joy and delight. Paracelsus confidently reported he had discovered the slug's secretions, and in response to Goldie's surprised suggestion that the substance could be used as an acid against zombies, he clarified the idea had promise, but it was not an acid, and instead had another interesting application. He continued, saying some slug species feed on sound energy while others live passively, hiding and waiting for prey, and slug varieties depend on their habitat and can differ dramatically. Worried, the girl asked whether he planned to breed a powerful slug that could destroy all the zombies and whether they would be in danger. The young man replied that slugs were usually harmless and rarely posed a threat to people. With enthusiasm, he began a story rooted in the distant era when alchemy flourished. Alchemists, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a passion for experimentation, repeatedly attempted to combine human and animal organisms in daring experiments, creating bizarre hybrids, chimeras, and terrible monsters. He continued the story, saying that in one experiment, ordinary slime became a black, viscous monster that absorbed all organic matter and quickly grew to enormous size, plunging everyone into panic and fear that the Black Death would engulf the entire world. One of the founding elves then appeared and taught everyone fire-spitting magic. For them, this marked the start of the whole magical era. Even with the terrible monster defeated, human losses were immeasurable. Goldie was horrified to learn how dangerous slugs can be. The boy continued the story, explaining that the alchemists then realized they had to correct past mistakes and added a permanent feature to the slug's original genetic code that remains despite later changes in the species. This trait made slugs friendly to humans. They became naturally curious and affectionate toward people. Thus, all slug species that were potentially dangerous or hostile to humans died out naturally. Paracelsus plans to recreate a relatively weak slug, hoping his formulation skill will produce the needed effect and neutralize all the zombies threatening the group's safety. Goldie interrupted impatiently, said he'd get straight to the point, and asked what kind of slug the young man planned to make. The man stood and said seriously that before creating the slug, he had an important statement to make. When he first acquired his unique skill, he had been in a hurry and missed many details. With no time to learn the subtleties, spell-type skills worked on the rule that as long as you hold the item, you can use it. Despite his limited knowledge, Paracelsus noticed the Dark Knight's magic resembled the forbidden death magic. Confused, the girl did not know what the consequences of such a development would be. The young man hurried to ease her doubts, noting that the Dark Knight carried no relevant books or notes. At last, the young man noticed the woman always carried a book from the very first minutes they met, and wanting to see the secret for himself, he asked to see the pages of her mysterious manuscript. Paracelsus agreed to read the book but insisted it must not prove to be the incarnation of the Dark Knight, since the consequences could be unpredictable and dangerous. The girl asked what the young man would do if it turned out she was the Dark Knight. The young man said he would keep her secret and not try to take her power, only asking that they be freed from the trap and refusing to do evil. The honest, noble answer left Goldie stunned and in disbelief. Trusting him, she handed the book to the young man and let him study it as long as he needed. Reading the publication, Paracelsus quickly realized mere possession was not enough. The book offered no explanation of how to acquire another person's skill. He proposed there must be extra conditions that allow someone to master another's talents. He realized this was a grim form of aid in fire magic. By directing magic into it and holding it in his hand, he no longer had to concentrate or form spells. Casting time dropped to a minimum. Power and accuracy rose, and only his hand was occupied so he could focus on other things. Goldie stumbled on this rare artifact in a local magic shop, but if she wanted, she could easily get any similar item thanks to influential patrons and unlimited resources. Paracelsus was surprised she had not known about the ancient catastrophe involving slugs, since alchemy teaches it as a fundamental lesson and the study of magic also mentions it. She was genuinely pleased to find not a simple-minded fool, but an observant, intelligent conversational partner who could ask deep, important questions. She said she had no teachers, taught herself, came from a poor family, and only knew how to cast a fireball and a few minor spells. It was embarrassing to admit, but she lacked the qualifications of a major apprentice. If not for the grim war, even casting a fireball would take a long time. At that close range, Goldie was completely helpless. She suggested he check whether she had hidden a book of death magic nearby. Paracelsus, flushed with shame, apologized for his mistake, and, overcome with guilt, fell to his knees before the woman to show deep respect and regret. And he thought he had been unacceptably rude and tactless, but she was pleasantly surprised by his attentiveness, saying she appreciated his wit and asking him to share any observations when there was something to discuss. She was pleased the young man had taken care to verify even her identity, but the most shocking thing was his later reaction, since he expected the cruel villain to stop his evil deeds after a single polite request to give them up. Goldie finished by saying that if she had been a real enemy, his fate would have been far worse because of how frank his questions were. Mistrust can be useful, but acting alone and ignoring allies dooms you to defeat. Paracelsus said passionately that his one wish was to end the conflict peacefully, avoid bloodshed and suffering, and protect the lives of friends and loved ones. The woman faced the young man and spoke firmly, insisting he listen, saying they were here, knowingly risking their lives for a shared goal. To escape this nightmare and survive, he must immediately shed his naivete, face the harsh reality, and abandon childish dreams. The dark night stood nearby, surrounded by a vast army of the living dead, grimly waiting for the enemy, preparing to repel the attack and seize the advantage in the coming battle. An excited girl appeared suddenly, her voice trembling as she announced their main enemy had arrived and stood threateningly right in front of the main gate of the fortress, ready to fight. Goldie said she would go meet the threat and told Dahlia to brief the young man on the current situation and the team's plans. Hesitantly, the young man asked what to do, and she gently invited him closer. Dahlia explained that with that movement, she channels the accumulated magical energy into her palms, making the spell stronger. Paracelsus watched as the symbolic image glowed, showing how intense the energy was. Staring into the light-filled mirror that reflected the spell, the young man suddenly saw the warped face of the Dark Knight watching the group's every move. The reflected vision amazed him, and he asked how the mechanism worked. The girl explained that certain hand gestures allowed her to automatically connect to the matching magic circle. Finger positions determine the connection. The index finger is the main gate, the ring finger is the back gate, and the middle finger is the tower's magic circle. The chosen combination selects which magic circle transmits images, and it cannot be filmed because it only passes sound and light. The young man thought he would see nothing from the top of the tower. Dahlia said that pressing her little finger increases the flow of light and sound and demonstrated it. Dark Knight was upset that they had started talking loudly. The Dark Knight saw it was the same man and suggested he get down. The young man said he still wanted to live. The enemy said the man probably did not care if the girls died. Paracelsus said the girls would be safe because he had a reliable way to destroy the zombie army, and an attack by the Dark Knight would cost him his life, so he advised retreating and staying away from the fortress. He said he would not hurt the enemy, and only asked that he and the others be returned home and that he not do bad things. Dark Knight said he was asking too much and called him weak. The young man insisted negotiations did not need force but was told they did. The Dark Knights sneered that the weak could only die helplessly and told the young man to be quiet. The young man then proposed that if the ladies gave him the boy, he would send them back to the real world. The monster gave the girls an hour to decide and warned he had been unusually generous so far, but if they resisted, their value would disappear. There would be no place for the beauties in his collection, and he would not hesitate to send them to be torn apart by zombies. Goldie asked Sylvia if she had heard the enemy's threats and told her to inform the others so they could plan their next move while she watched the Dark Knight to buy the team time, and Sylvia understood and ordered everyone to gather. Paracelsus saw the situation was critical and urgently told Dahlia to suspend the active spell. Dahlia agreed at once, aware of the danger and the need to act now. Excited by the idea of creating a special slug that could handle hordes of the living dead, he asked his assistant to prepare the necessary materials and help implement the bull plan. Make this unique mixture with a capacious wooden barrel, a fresh, unripe slug, ordinary gravel, dry fallen leaves, remains of edible vegetables and fertile humus. Next, make a hole in the bottom of the barrel and layer gravel, humus, leaves, and vegetable scraps. Control how much live food the slug eats to prevent it from changing into an undesirable form. A large number of insects will ruin everything. He clearly explained that the next step was to release the immature slug into a specially prepared container. Paracelsus also noted that slugs cannot tolerate high temperatures and low humidity, so he required adding clean, cool water to the container. After laying out the ingredients, close the lid tightly, but periodically ventilate the barrel and mix the contents thoroughly because fermentation raises the temperature and can reduce the final product's quality. The slug can uniquely adapt to its environment, slowly consuming all available matter and evolving new traits that mark it as a microbial slug. Dahlia was genuinely surprised at how quickly the slug processed the components. Paracelsus explained it was the effect of his recipe. Once the key stages were complete, the whole system automatically adapted and accelerated the processes until they reached perfection. He said the slug decomposed poorly, but the recipe fixed that, so the young man planned to use it as a bargaining chip to ask again for their release from this world, and the girl liked the plan. Realizing the attack directions were uncertain, he decided to make 3 more slugs to strengthen the defense. The obedient assistant approved the plan and promised to support the teacher's efforts. Dahlia beamed with genuine joy, knowing that with their joint efforts they had managed to create 3 more slimes. The young man suggested putting slugs where zombies were likely to attack. He said that even if his talent couldn't stop the threat completely, the slugs would still slow the enemy's advance. A curious girl asked what was happening in the other barrel. The man kindly explained he was preparing a small side project there and worked on it in spare minutes between his main tasks. He added that he wanted to ask exactly about this. Dahlia was genuinely amazed by alchemy's possibilities, marveling at how fascinating and magical the descriptions sounded, and carefully brought up her own interest, asking timidly whether it would be realistic for her to take up the work and become a master of alchemy. Paracelsus asked whether the girl had created the spell herself, and she confirmed she was self-taught and could master healing magic if she had enough free time. The young man observed that in that case learning alchemy would be problematic because alchemists deal with elements, primordial matter, not the kind of magic wizards use, and the boundaries between the two disciplines are clearly defined. He explained that for alchemists, primordial matter is a raw material, an ingredient used to create various objects and substances. For wizards, magic is like a form of force and energy that sets various phenomena and processes in motion. If one tries to apply alchemy within magic, releasing the so-called primordial matter and attempting to turn it into fire with a spell, one will feel a natural resistance to the process. Try using alchemy as if it were magic. Bottle the power, split it, or mix it with something else to create something fundamentally new, but no matter how hard you try, the result will be negative. Seemingly impossible, physically incompatible actions make people subconsciously use a kind of persuasion that assumes the intended outcome is not feasible, and this effect is often called subconscious pressure. Paracelsus explained that in high-pressure zones, even with complete certainty, it is impossible to get the desired result. So buildings linked to magical practice are not built near famous alchemist laboratories, and the reverse is avoided. Rare individuals fluent in both alchemy and magic have overcome that barrier. They must have exceptional qualities, either extraordinary endurance or a natural genius. This information caught Dolly's interest. Smiling encouragingly, the young man said that wanting to grow is always useful, and promised to share his knowledge as soon as he could, and the joyful girls sincerely thanked the mentor for the generous offer. The boy told the slug to behave, then he heard footsteps behind him. Goldie called to him. She said their discussion was over and that Dahlia and Paracelsus should go up. The young man immediately understood she meant he was now officially allowed on the 2nd floor of the ancient building. They went up to the 2nd floor and entered the main hall. The man felt the tension at once and, seeing about 20 people, scanned the room. Goldie said some stood guard outside while most were gathered here. Paracelsus, breathing hard and sweating from the rising tension, saw that some of the people gathered looked very ill and quickly concluded they had probably been attacked by a swarm of zombies, leaving them almost unconscious and weak. The girl noticed the young man's stare and told him not to stare so much. He looked away and apologized, his face flushing with shame as he worried about his bad manners and realized the behavior was inappropriate. Goldie introduced him to everyone, thinking they already knew, but she explained he had special powers to fight the Dark Knight. With him, they had a chance to resist, and she refused to give him up. Then she asked anyone with objections to raise their hands. Lily demanded to know what chance they had of beating the Dark Knight, and Rose backed her, saying they already knew about the newcomer's first power and now wanted details on the second. Paracelsus said the Dark Knight had two powers, control of the dead and passage to the mirror world. Knowing this gives them a significant advantage, so he thinks they have a good chance of winning. This is why he never reveals his second ability, he added. The enemy might be secretly eavesdropping on their discussions with a spell that lets them see and hear through the eyes and ears of zombies, flies, and mice. The man said he had a well-thought-out plan to defeat the enemy, and Violet grew interested and urged him to explain his ideas to the group in detail, hoping to hear something truly effective and viable. The young man proposed a daring plan. First, hand him over to the dark of night. Dahlia sprang up from her seat at the suggestion, her eyes wide with anxiety and worry. Goldie, Sylvia, Violet, Lily, and Rose heard the unexpected statement, turned sharply toward the speaker, and stared at him wearily. Everyone was at a loss, trying to grasp the full extent of the risk their new ally had accepted. Paracelsus said that, judging by the enemy's actions, the Dark Knight would come close, and then you would deliver the decisive blow. After hearing him, the others asked in surprise whether he intended to act alone. The young man said that if they faced him together, the enemy could quickly retreat and force a long standoff, denying them a quick victory. But if they caught him in such a blunder, the victory could be swift and decisive. Paracelsus said he would fight alone, but if he gained the advantage, he asked them to support him with all their strength. And if he began to lose, they should remain observers and not provoke the enemy while he tried to flee with all his strength. The young man's idea felt thrilling and strange to Sylvia, and it made her eyes light with curiosity and her thin lips form a mysterious smile as she perked up, eager for an intriguing, risky battle. Sylvia suggested testing how far the boy could go and told him to give it his all. The young warrior accepted her offer. The door swung open, and Dahlia hurried into the corridor, calling to Paracelsus. The little girl said timidly that he had decided to try to negotiate with the enemy to secure the release of the captives, but her quiet voice showed doubt and fear, and she felt it would be too dangerous to go there alone. The teacher leaned toward the student and quietly said that after considering how many people were at risk, he had to change his original decision. He clarified that the earlier point is also true. A special trump card gives him a chance to gain the upper hand in the fight. It is important to act decisively, focus effort into a single powerful blow to finish the job quickly and avoid long, drawn-out fights and unnecessary risks. Looking at Dahlia warmly, he said he could rely on her alone, then quietly asked her to keep safe the important thing he'd given her earlier. And Dahlia, deeply moved by her mentor's words, agreed. Cautiously, Goldie asked Paracelsus whether he planned to involve her in the fighting, and he reassured her that he had no plans for her to take part in the battle. The master said he would make as many slugs as possible to fight zombies, promised a detailed list of required ingredients, and warned the work would be large-scale and need 3 more people to help. His priority was to take part in at least one stage of preparing to fight the threat. He urged his assistants to keep producing useful slugs until the last possible moment, even if the worst happened and he died. Goldie noticed the flames dimming and asked whether Paracelsus had caused the change. The alchemist raised an eyebrow, pleasantly surprised that the young sorceress had caught such a subtle shift in magic. Explaining that slimes were vulnerable to fire, he lowered the area's fire energy to make them harder to destroy with fire magic. It had not been expected to weaken the girl's fireball so much. She said that if it had affected her more, she would have become even angrier. Goldie asked whether Paracelsus really did not want them to join him if something happened, since she was ready to support him. Paracelsus replied he would find a way to cope on his own, and Goldie noted he sounded confident and made a request. Her request was that if he fled and the Dark Knight chose to destroy the place with them, he should at least take Dahlia, who was still a child and too young to die. Paracelsus drank the elixir, hoping it would increase his strength, then named the slug Shogoth and asked whether it liked the elixir. After being named, the slug's mental abilities increased significantly. The reason is unknown. The man asked his partner to watch his every move and follow his instructions, then carefully climbed down the rope ladder, keeping his balance and moving with steady confidence. A massive horde of zombies packed the square in front of the building, creating a terrifying sight that made it clear approaching was dangerous. The warrior stared at the scene before him, and doubt slowly creased his face as a battle between resolve and uncertainty played out inside him. The main enemy, the Dark Knight, commanding a huge army, stood in the middle of the chaos, confidently directing every movement of his invincible forces as the embodiment of absolute power and control over the scene. Paracelsus knew the situation was serious. His enemies kept their distance, aware of his power. Dark Knight could only wonder. He had expected the girls to keep the boy's secret, but things turned out differently. The enemy refused to waste time, and planned first to stop the man from moving by cutting off his legs, and said he would hear any pleas for mercy only after the man was helpless and motionless. Paracelsus snatched the Shogoth slug and threw it at the advancing zombie army to distract them and gain a brief advantage for himself. Dark Knight shouted for his troops to defend him immediately from the slug coming straight at them. The little friends hit one of the zombies, and the resourceful warrior immediately ordered all infected creatures to be turned into fertilizer to prevent the threat from spreading further. The Dark Knight watched in amazement as his zombies vanished into thin air in an instant, leaving him puzzled about what to do next. His attention shifted to something even stranger and more frightening. The slug thrown earlier was visibly growing before his eyes, and he was clearly surprised. Paracelsus saw it as a brilliant solution and immediately gave a loud order to apply the method of turning zombies into compost again, adding the phrase add, and add again to the recipe. The Dark Knight realized the situation was critical. The slug kept growing, feeding on decaying bodies, becoming larger and stronger and threatening the army and even its master. The slugs lunged forward and instantly grabbed the nearest zombie, freezing the army leader in horror as a slug slowly swallowed its prey whole, oozing a sticky mass while it grew larger. Paracelsus felt both delighted and horrified as he watched his tiny assistant swell to enormous size and become a huge slug. Dark Knight shouted commands, urgently ordering the zombies to stop panicking, regroup, and attack the young hero to finish him off. The army of the dead rushed the young man at lightning speed, making terrifying moans and surging in a chaotic mass, filling the young fighter with real horror. The Dark Knight receded, saving his life, while Paracelsus, determined to stop the enemy's escape, shouted angrily that he would not allow it, and rushed straight through the ranks of the living dead into mortal danger. Diving quickly into the giant Shogoth slug's body, he found himself submerged in its thick, pulsing flesh. The assistant formed an air chamber inside his body so his master could breathe freely. The young man searched his body frantically for the hidden object. At last he found a small bag and told himself the contents were likely dry and undamaged. Paracelsus asked his unusual companion to throw him high into the air, and the Shogoth obeyed, pushing the alchemist up with great force as if to display his power. High in the sky, the young man felt a strong fear of heights but pulled himself together, calmed down, and focused on the main goal of finding the enemy. When the enemy came into view, he carefully threw the treasured bag toward him. The young hero felt disappointed and annoyed when he realized he had missed his target. Meanwhile, Dahlia in the castle had anticipated the failure and worked out the distance beforehand, ready to correct her comrade's mistake with her intervention. She shouted that her priority was to get in front of him and activated a dash to the south. The girl cast a flight spell on the wind, which shifted direction and sent the bag straight to its target. The pouch suddenly fell in front of Dark Knight. Paracelsus was glad the magic circle left inside had worked, appreciated his assistant's work, and then fell back into Shogoth. Dahlia wasn't sure the pouch would reach its target, so she cast a fire spell to ignite it, adding momentum and letting her watch and guide its path. Dark Knight froze, staring at the strange object in front of him when the bag burst into bright light and exploded, showering him with fiery fragments. Paracelsus saw the explosion's effect and cried out with joy, satisfied the plan had worked. Violet said with delight that the enemy army had been badly hit by fire. Rose agreed eagerly, and both friends were deeply impressed by the massive explosion they had caused. Paracelsus stood amazed, feeling intense heat even though he was far from the explosion. The Dark Knight appeared and declared that no living man could survive an explosion so close. The warrior saw the enemy still alive, and then the explosion happened. The young man was confused because he could not understand what had happened and assumed the fireball caused it. Boldy shouted for everyone to pay attention and prepare for battle because something massive was coming from the west. Rose stared in horror. A monster loomed before the two archers, its size and hideous appearance filling them with raw fear and making the girl's heart race. Recognizing the monster as a dragon, Violet panicked and told her friend they had to leave immediately before the beast attacked. The monster suddenly opened its mouth and sprayed a huge stream of liquid that filled the area in front of it. Paracelsus was amazed that the Dark Knights could make zombies from even giant creatures, so he ordered Shogoth to hurry toward the cathedral. But then he noticed something suspicious behind him. Zombies, driven by a blind urge to kill, keep climbing onto the slug's surface, even though they know its caustic liquid will dissolve their flesh. The young man fought to stay calm, mentally noting new observations in the recipe, but at that moment, he sensed someone unpredictable and extremely dangerous closing in on them. The Dark Knight appeared from the shadows, grabbed the man by the collar, and intended to end his experiments once and for all. Throwing the warrior straight into the crowd of zombies, he confidently pulled off his camouflage mask, revealing his true face. At last, he flung the mask behind him with a scornful gesture, leaving his body floating inside the slug's thick bulk. The mask flew a short distance and landed squarely on the head of one of his zombies, making it look like a ridiculous cartoon creature. As Paracelsus recovered from the sudden attack, the same zombie grabbed him, and its head wore an extra mask, so the unfortunate man now had two faces grimacing in different directions. The Dark Knight laughed maliciously and declared that the forces of darkness had won. The Dark Knight growled, grinning, and declared that before the slug could reach him, he would break the young hero's skull. After winning, the man saw clearly that the person before him was not ordinary and had no abilities either. The enemy ordered someone to check if the warrior's recipe had materialized, and the young man guessed the order was meant for someone else. Dark Knight insisted the invisible assistant not interfere, saying this was a private confrontation between them. Paracelsus suspected some of the girls had abilities and were in danger. The young man urgently told Shogoth to go to the cathedral and protect Dahlia at all costs because he could no longer fight, while the Dark Knight ordered silence and told Shogoth to watch only him, sensing victory was near. Sylvia burst into view with a glittering blade and immediately attacked the enemy, swinging the sword with deadly precision and grace. Staggering, the enemy could barely stay upright, breathing hard and clutching his chest as blood poured from the precise blow of the brave girl's blade. Paracelsus asked the girl what she was doing there. She said he seemed interesting and she would follow him since she was going to die somewhere anyway. Urgently, the young man shouted that the most important thing right now was in the cathedral and that everyone there was in mortal danger, so they had to rush there immediately and run as fast as they could. Sylvia said he was utterly insane, willing to risk his life to save other people's souls rather than look after his own safety. Paracelsus asked Sylvia to leave quickly, but she said she was already leaving and to let her go, while the young man said he could not because his disguise spell only worked close to him. He asked Nora for help. Nora told the gentleman not to go to the cathedral because he was so badly injured that unless she eased his pain he would not be able to move. She asked them to leave the others and try to save at least the man so he would survive. The young man asked Sylvia which of the girls could write spells, and she replied that only Goldie and Dahlia could. He then asked if anyone else was listening to their conversation. The knight waited for a reply, but if anyone was listening, it was probably Goldie, the only one capable of making that connection. Paracelsus concluded that, based on the circumstances and available facts, the Dark Knight is one of the two girls, Goldie or Dahlia. The Dark Knight's powers, he figured, were creating a mirror world and necromancy, and if he could steal other people's skills, the list would grow, but for now he suggested focusing on these two. Her reluctance to attack openly makes her as much a coward as he is, so she must come up with a clever plan, wait for the right moment, steal his powers unnoticed, and keep herself completely safe. Sylvia realized the enemy planned to exploit trust to get closer, and then asked what the young men would do if his suspicions were confirmed. Paracelsus declared he would enter the battle, defeat the enemy, and demand a return to the real world, and if victory proved impossible, would transfer his unique abilities to Dahlia before dying. Sylvia replied that Dahlia could be an enemy too, and the young man said that if Dahlia had powers as well, others would hunt her, and she might be the one to kill him, but not necessarily the others. If she was an ordinary person, let her run away anywhere in this world as long as she stayed alive. He wanted time to do at least something useful, and he would never forgive himself if he left the child in trouble. The tension made his head spin. Paracelsus entrusted his comrade with the recipe intended for Dahlia, but Sylvia cut him off irritably, insisting he stay silent and that the comrade personally deliver it to Dahlia, since they still had a chance to prove their victory. Dark Knight sliced one of his own zombies in half with a strong blow, exposing a black magical sword inside that glowed with ominous energy. As the Dark Knight rushed forward with his drawn weapon, Sylvia instinctively drew her own blade to parry the enemy's attack and protect her friend. She countered quickly and landed a crushing blow, making Paracelsus stagger, lose his balance, and soon fall to the ground, unconscious. Dark Knight chuckled and admitted he loved fighting, especially when the risk of death made it more thrilling. Sylvia said it brought them closer because she felt the same rush from dangerous fights. Paracelsus found the city girl surprisingly strong. She said there was only a short distance left and told him to go on alone if he could walk. The young man agreed. The young man rose and hurried to join the others. Meanwhile, in the cathedral, the dragon kept trying to reach the girls to devour them. He was suddenly hit by a fireball. Goldie quickly asked how her comrades were. Violet urged her friend to leave at once because the dragon still breathed poison and was preparing to strike again. Goth appeared out of nowhere and landed a sudden blow that struck the dragon and amazed Goldie, who did not expect such a powerful protector to arrive at the most needed moment. The slug greedily sank its teeth into the dragon's scaly body, trying to swallow the giant beast whole. The dragon was not helpless. Sensing danger, the dragon breathed poison directly into the attacker. Paracelsus saw that such a blow could melt even a Shoggoth, so he realized it was a deadly weapon, a poison that could destroy any monster regardless of strength or size. Realizing the danger, he knew the slug had no resistance to the dragon's deadly poison, so accepting the dragon's gift would lead to disaster. Never expecting to face such a dangerous foe to his loyal slime, the young man froze in the middle of the battlefield, confused and trying to grasp the scale of the threat. The alchemist saw that the first blow had worked and ordered his subordinate creation to gather the giant's dying fragments and deliver another blow to drain the enemy's strength and win the battle. Shoggoth silently accepted the master's command and, gathering the last of his essence, rushed forward. But the slugs stopped in front of the dragon, paused to gauge the distance, then attacked, delivering a powerful blow with their hands to the dragon's vulnerable spot. The slime kept attacking, striking again and pouring every ounce of its strength into each blow, and the giant's body shook under the enormous mass, flesh torn, bones crushed, insides burned by its poison. Seeing the attack working, Paracelsus shouted to Shoggoth, ordering him to keep pounding the enemy with all his might. Goldie appeared at the boy's side, watching as the young man turned to the girl and asked how to get into the building to try to save people, since time was running out and decisions had to be made immediately. Goldie told the young man the first ladder had collapsed, but she would hurry to set up a backup ladder elsewhere to provide a safe path inside. And the young man urged her to move fast, because the situation was critical and every second could cost lives. Paracelsus realized the dragon was incredibly strong. No matter how much the slime attacked, it did almost no damage, though he kept it on the defensive. Suddenly, the slime lifted its master higher. Shoggoth split off part of its mass and pushed it upward, carefully lifting its creator out of harm's way so the alchemist could escape the damaged area, while the slug focused on guarding its master and continued attacking the dragon. The young man froze in amazement, barely understanding what had happened when his loyal friend willingly gave part of himself to save him, leaving him full of gratitude and worry for his ally's future. Paracelsus sighed as he stared at his fallen friend's remains, grief heavy on him until Goldie called out, pulling him back and urging him to compose himself and focus on keeping the rest of the team alive. In a tense voice, she ordered the boy to take Dahlia and get out of the collapsing building, warning it was about to give way from the damage. The young man, worried, asked if the girl could get out on her own or if she would need help. Goldie said firmly she would stay until the end because many of the wounded and immobile needed help. She made it her duty to protect everyone who could no longer get up and run on their own. Paracelsus assessed the situation at once. Goldie had warned him Dahlia knew the escape route and was waiting in the library's north wing, so the young man had to go there immediately to make his escape. He clearly saw the enemy's attack had one aim: to drive him into a corner, cut off his room to maneuver, and make him easy prey. Only by understanding the enemy's intentions could he avoid a fatal outcome and escape the trap, preserving a chance to survive. He knew the attack might stop once he left. If the enemy was among them, getting out fast became even more urgent. He still could not understand why Goldie, if she had powers, would let him escape with Dahlia. The young man assumed the plan was to let him get close to the girl and then use them as hostages. Or Dahlia was working with Goldie, or Goldie simply did not want the girl to die and was willing to do anything to keep her safe. Separating the two ability holders would help him greatly. Right now, he could learn exactly which one is the enemy and end the matter for good. Unable to identify the culprit, he would transfer his abilities to Dahlia and help her escape. Paracelsus realized there had been many chances to get rid of him before, but for some reason those chances were not taken. He did not know whether it was a special recipe or something else, but the enemy definitely needed an important ability from him. Meeting the teacher's gaze, Dahlia heard the mentor say firmly that she had accidentally overheard their whole conversation and had to evacuate immediately. Lowering her eyes, she hesitated and admitted she did not yet feel ready to leave her shelter. The boy asked what the girl held in her hands. She said it was a book of spells and that there were likely many similar copies here. The young man said in confusion that he understood nothing of the book's text and asked whether she was channeling magic into the book to create a special spell. Dahlia explained that you must channel magical power through the writing, or it will be ordinary letters. Goldie's grimoire is an example of such a book. Paracelsus found this interesting and realized that if the girl wrote as the book instructed, it would be a spell. The girl added that besides transmitting magical power, the letters must be mirrored. The letters looked mirrored, so writing them the right way was crucial. Otherwise, the spells would fail, and the effect would be reversed. The young man realized the mirror world was arranged exactly the same way. A sudden clarity came to the alchemist, showing him the only right way out. He motioned the girl closer and said it was time to flee. Paracelsus realized Goldie really had magical powers. Her statement about a grim war in this world suggested the book had been created in the mirror reality. He worried about why she lied when she could have simply said she had found him before she arrived. His guess was that she had not expected the question, answered by accident, and he had not noticed at the time. Dea had claimed there was a hidden passage in the tunnel and had shown him where it was. The young man finally realized Goldie's lie had a specific motive to bring him closer to the little student. With no choice left, Paracelsus had to follow the enemy's premeditated plan. He pursed his lips, turned to Dahlia, and offered her the chance to go first, promising to give a signal when it became necessary to change the route. He took matters into his own hands because he felt responsible for his companion's safety, and together they went deeper into the dungeon's dark corridors, guided by intuition and hope for a successful outcome. In the half-ruined building, Goldie spoke to the huge dragon with the calm of a seasoned strategist, confidently announcing that the two travelers had already left the fortress using one of the escape routes. She raised her hand and cast a spell that the flesh vessel's time for devouring was over, and it should return to oblivion. Complaining loudly, the girl said that putting up with this awful stench was torture, and working with dragons seemed impossible. Goldie found the huge creatures and those outside the vessels too willful, so she limited herself to zombies. Dark Knight admitted he was guilty and had gotten carried away, and Goldie warned that if he disobeyed orders again, he would not live. Goldie asked, worried, whether he was sure he had destroyed all the slimes, since missing even one could cause big problems. And the Dark Knight tried to calm her, saying he had done everything he could to eliminate the threat, and there was nothing to worry about. He insisted that when the time came to remove Paracelsus, she should leave this important matter to him. His reason was that the boy proved surprisingly strong for his age, which greatly unsettled the knight. Goldie's boss calmly gave her consent to the executor. The Dark Knight seemed to laugh, eager to meet this warrior again. Leaving Paracelsus's cozy home, Nora and Coco set out to search for him through the dense forest. They soon reached a small pond that seemed normal and safe. Nora concluded the area matched the Beastman dog's description, and the air around the pond suggested the presence of dead spirits, though that feeling came not from the water, but from the space inside it. After studying the scene, the girl concluded that the water's smooth surface acted as a portal, and that movement between dimensions passed through the reflection, linking the real world with parallel spaces. Nora noticed that before meeting her, the gentleman had been too carefree and relaxed, and after analyzing his behavior, she thought he might have been noticed long before they met, perhaps by a strong rival who had been watching him for a long time. Thanks to the Norn group's actions, the dog hid the soul's tracks leading away from this pond, but the controller of those souls likely noticed the surveillance and moved his plans concerning the owner forward. Burke asked Nora if she was still by the pond. The feathered companion said he had caught 2 mice and asked whether she would try the treat. Drool ran down the girl's face as she eagerly agreed to try the long-awaited food. They quickly lit a small fire and began cooking. The scent of roasting meat spread through the area. Burke explained that these rodents are called grass mice because they eat only certain plants, so when they are cooked over a fire, the scent of those aromatic herbs soaks into the meat, giving the dish a distinct taste and pleasant aroma. The bird said with a satisfied look that it was used to eating its prey fresh and alive and thought it was the best way to satisfy its hunger. Nora sat nearby and inhaled the smell of roasting meat, noting that the dish smelled excellent and appetizing. She noticed Burke's strict rules about eating meat and wondered if they applied here. Her feathered companion confirmed. The mistress followed those nutrition rules but sometimes made exceptions, showing flexibility and tolerance. He said that when meat was right in front of her, the owner looked very sad, so the bird only ate meat out of her sight, and it must be difficult to be a pet of such an unusual person. Burke found the master strange but not off-putting, since she was one of the few in this country willing to work with the beastmen and genuinely cares for everyone, both the weak and those who are used by others, and he admitted it was difficult. He still believed that a world like that needed at least one person to fight and shed tears for those suffering and dying, though he did not understand why this was done and found the bird itself strange. And the bird asked if it would eat the hairball and was told it would not. Norn asked the interlocutor to say Paracelsus would return in about 3 days, and earnestly asked her not to worry needlessly, adding that tomorrow Paracelsus would definitely show up and explain everything in detail, but for now the girl could rest peacefully tonight. Paracelsus poured warm water slowly into an old wooden bathtub. The water hissed softly, making a gentle melody that mixed with the scent of herbal infusions. When the bathtub reached the right level, the young man carefully took a 60-degree coin from his pocket, slowly lowering the coin into the warm water. He said that a bath like this restores strength and eases fatigue, and medicinal herbs chosen for healing gave the ideal mix of aromas and effects to speed tissue and cell regeneration. The mentor stepped into the room and told the student the healing water was already waiting, inviting her to take a dip first, and the child gasped, impressed that the bath was ready and that the young man's recipe worked so well. Interested in him, the girl gathered her courage and, worried, asked how his eye had been hurt in the fight with Dark Knight. Paracelsus thanked the girl warmly, saying her healing skills had clearly improved the condition, and Dahlia was pleased with the result. She urged him to tell her if the pain in his eye got worse or if any unpleasant symptoms appeared. The girl sincerely wanted to help her mentor and look after his health. The young man obediently agreed to the student's request. After escaping the cathedral, he spent a long time thinking about the route ahead, and recalling the journey he pictured them moving through the darkness at night, hurrying away from danger and walking until dawn, finally choosing a random house where they stopped. Recognizing the full power of the healing art, Paracelsus knew his companion's magic had stopped the bleeding. Restoration of vision seemed unlikely because a constant veil remained over the eyes, blurring the outlines of objects and making it hard to orient oneself in space. The young man suddenly started frantically searching his old leather bag and sorting its contents. He took the pouch out of the bag, held his breath, and carefully untied the knots. After carefully shaking out the bag, the boy found a small, barely alive Shoggoth on the floor. Paracelsus resolutely decided to do everything possible to save the baby and give the care and treatment needed for recovery. He suggested that making a special compost for the slug to grow in would help it recover, and that gave him an interesting idea. Even if he succeeded, Goldie would still have fireballs and a poisonous dragon. He suggested it might be better to turn the slime into a different kind of slime. History recorded a few cases of adult slimes changing type, but that was extremely rare. The young man had heard of such experiments and assumed his recipe would produce the same result. The alchemist first considered choosing a primordial element useful in battle, but each had its own weaknesses, and he wanted to create something unique. Paracelsus remembered that slimes are often bred to absorb different materials, so he proposed making a slime that feeds on things that inconvenience opponents, such as clothing. Options came to mind: air, stone, sound, light, heat, magical energy. Magical energy seemed best, but it would require his friend to withstand the poison while he absorbed the energy. That was problematic. He heard that some travelers lived in symbiosis with slime, drawing energy from any organic matter and staying in the dungeons for several days, though it was risky and could sometimes grant superhuman abilities. With risks low and accidents unlikely, he focused on performing the integration carefully to ensure a successful symbiosis between the human body and the unique creature. Worried, the boy leaned toward his little companion and gently asked whether he could hear him. He added that if the slime could hear him and move, he would let it eat his right eye, remember his body, and ask to live inside him to work for him. In pain, the Shoggoth's creator watched his suffering friend, eyes red with tears, the cheek the slime had almost touched wet with tear stains, and he whispered words of comfort, pleading with the creature to hold on and not give up. A small slug crept across Paracelsus's skin toward his eye, and when it touched him, it sent intense pain pulsing through his body, the slime slowing its entry into the socket and each movement feeling like a sharp cut. Shaking violently, he realized that although his vision was intact, the pain was so intense tears streamed down his face, and each second the slime stayed in his eye sent unbearable spasms through his nerves. Dahlia lay relaxed in the hot water, and for the first time felt the tiredness of the past days fade. The bath, scented with aromatic oils and herbs, gave her long-awaited relief. Goldie turned to her and asked whether she could be heard. The girl's voice was quiet but clear, intruding on her pleasant sensations. Lost in her thoughts, Dahlia could not tell where the voice addressing her came from. Suddenly, Goldie said she had cast a magic circle on the back of her former companion's head, linking him to the surrounding energy. Confused, the girl did not know when Goldie had placed the magic circle on her neck. The answer came unexpectedly when Goldie calmly admitted she had done it without permission. Frightened by the revelation, Dahlia asked in a trembling voice whether the girl really controlled not only an army of zombies, but also the Dark Knight himself, and Goldie confirmed the student's fears. Calmly, she explained that to reach her important goals, she had to keep Paracelsus and Dahlia together for a while, and now the situation has changed, because with the power of Paracelsus' recipe, she has the tools to carry out her plans, and will succeed. Goldie, who likes the girl, asked her to steal the recipe from the mentor, saying the young man would give it willingly if she asked, and that she believed the recipe was kept in his breast pocket. And as a reward, Goldie promised to help her leave this world, saying money and other needs would not be a problem. Confused and upset, the girl could barely ask the question she cared about most, why the other girl had gone to such extreme measures and was manipulating her, and she was told the reasons could not be explained. Dahlia spoke harshly to the bitter woman who constantly wonders why she is alive, waiting for the moment zombies will eat her in this damp, creepy building, and now cannot remember the outside world where she was born and raised, having forgotten the freedom and joy ordinary people enjoy. After escaping with Paracelsus, she said she was free to roam. He called her an enemy and accused her of killing all their comrades, and she added that she felt a great relief at finally finding something worth living for. Dahlia said she wanted nothing more than to kill Goldie and live with this man. Dahlia believed the memories of her close friends were the best proof of her existence. Goldie listened carefully and asked him to enjoy her last moments with him. Paracelsus felt a rush of joy as the pain in his eye began to ease, and when he looked around, he saw the vision in his right eye restored and even clearer and more vivid than before. Wide-eyed, he took in his surroundings, amazed by a new sense of reality, and everything looked like 4K. While experimenting with his gaze, the young man found that concentrating on faraway objects made distant things much clearer. Suddenly, the boys saw a strange sight on a distant hill, where two tiny ladybugs were fighting fiercely, waving their little legs and butting each other. The discovery excited Paracelsus and made him curious, so he wanted to know the limits of his new abilities and decided to test how far his vision reached. Staggering, the young man lost his balance as his left eye, used to normal vision, clashed with his right eye, which had become hypersensitive and far more precise, and the mismatched images threw off his coordination. Dahlia opened the door and looked anxiously at her mentor. She asked if he was all right, and he said he was fine and had just tripped. Not having left a change of clothes for the girl at the bath, he felt a little embarrassed. Dahlia approached her mentor with an unusual request, saying she suspected a magic circle on her neck, and asking him to examine the spot closely and erase it. The mentor listened carefully and agreed immediately. Thinking it over, the girl concluded that without a supply of magical energy, the magic circle would not appear externally and would remain invisible to ordinary sight. She tried another method and suggested directing magic to the spot where Paracelsus's fingers touched. And the young man, a little embarrassed but amused, agreed, blushed, and cautiously moved toward the girl. After discovering a new ability in his vision, the man decided to test it and activated the zoom in his right eye, focusing on the hidden part of the magic circle to make out the details. While investigating, he suddenly noticed a bright, round seal glowing on his companion's neck. The girl froze because she had not activated any magical energy, and the strange event left her confused and full of questions. She asked if he could see the magic in her hand. He confirmed he could see the glow. She suggested the bath might have restored her magic so much that she was now using it without realizing. Paracelsus knew that with Shoggoth's eye he could see what normal eyes could not. But thinking Goldie might be listening, he stayed silent. And Dahlia asked him to draw a circular seal on paper, explaining that the type of seal depends on how it will be removed. Leaving the girl in the house, the young man climbed onto the roof, picking secure footholds and testing each one. Then, looking down, he heard his companion gently warn him to be careful. Climbing up, he realized it would be safer to use alchemy in a secure place. An alchemy workshop would be ideal, but none were likely here. Also, the many nearby religious buildings would make the subconscious effect too strong. Paracelsus paused, weighing whether to keep going to find an alchemy lab or a shop for the needed ingredients and tools, or to visit a castle on a high mountain. The young man suddenly said he saw people in the castle window. Dahlia, unsure where to look, blinked and tried to spot what he was pointing at. He told his companion to wait while he peered into the castle window, and seconds later, his eyes widened when he saw a child inside. Paracelsus froze, unable to believe his eyes when he saw Dahlia and Sylvia at the castle window, and the girl beside him was puzzled by his reaction, not realizing that the sight had filled him with shock and anxiety. The mentor asked whether she had ever been to that castle. Dolly said no. In fact, she hardly ever went outside, and there should have been a high wall in front of the castle. According to her, the area around the castle was nightmarish, inhabited not only by ordinary zombies, but also by strange monsters never seen by any living creature. The girl went on to explain that this was a roughly circular area around the cathedral. They had tried many times to break through on their own, but always failed, so searches for food and reconnaissance stayed within that perimeter. Realizing the city's other inhabitants also could not break through the wall, he decided to check other parts of the mirror world for similar people to understand how widespread the problem was. Paracelsus wanted to inspect the buildings outside the fortress wall, and after weighing the pros and cons, he decided he would probably go alone. But Dahlia, unwilling to leave her mentor, firmly objected and insisted on going with him. A few hours later, the boy discovered people living behind the fortress walls, including his familiar Sylvia and other community members. Wanting to tell Dahlia something important, the young man hesitated and asked her to give him time to think and sort his thoughts because the research findings seemed very valuable and potentially dangerous. Walking along the wall, Paracelsus saw other nearby places where girls lived. I assumed there were other places like the cathedral with very basic living conditions and surrounded by a wall, And if that applied across the whole country, there would be an enormous number of them, which made my head spin. Another stunning reality awaits the kids, the emergence of a new, amazing ability. Listing Goldie's abilities, he said she could control the dead and penetrate mirrors and could even create copies of people. And the young man suggested that previous owners of those skills had been chosen and had their powers taken by the woman. Paracelsus could not understand why she did those things and assumed she resented those people deeply, which explained why she kept them in that hellish place where zombies were seen as ordinary. The young man shuddered at the thought that zombies could become an accepted part of everyday life. He suspected the famous power to control zombies might not be a particular skill, but a personal trait of Goldie's tied to her innate magic. He thought it impossible. The subconscious pressure from hundreds and thousands of people who despise or hate forbidden magic gradually weakens it. Since there are no people in the mirror world, magic can be used freely. He wanted to see what would happen if he created many people who treated forbidden magic as normal. In that case, the subconscious pressure would instead strengthen that magic. The theory explains how Goldie, a single person, can control vast numbers of zombies, and in the mirror world, she strengthens her necromancy. Paracelsus looked closely at his companion and said Goldie probably had a talent for forbidden magic. He insisted she hear the whole thing and told her that in this world forbidden magic could be used freely and was even stronger. Dahlia understood magic better than he did, so she took it all in stride. The young man said it was possible these were all three powers given by God, but he thought it made sense to assume this place served as a foundation for forbidden magic, since Goldie's power could change reality itself and she did not need a foundation. Dahlia realized that forbidden magic kept not only them, but other people trapped and locked up, all for this reason. And when Paracelsus asked about the people there, he answered, trying not to shock Dahlia, that there are identical people on the other side. The student asked, her voice full of concern, whether she had understood that another version of her personality existed, possibly repeating many times alongside her. The mentor confirmed this and said the idea seemed the most reasonable and logical. Thoughtfully, the girl said her memory has blurry spots, gaps, and unclear moments that are hard to explain. After thinking she might be someone's copy, she suddenly realized how harmoniously the pieces of her life fit together. Paracelsus expected the news to make an impression, but the student's reaction was far stronger than he had guessed, and the girl looked lost and upset as if she had just realized her life was confined to an illusion. Suddenly, Goldie's familiar voice came from the magical seal, ingratiating and sarcastic, saying she was very surprised the young man had figured this out on his own. She said she had planned to give them time to enjoy their date, but now she realized the man had been perceptive and she should not have underestimated alchemy. Paracelsus, overcome with excitement and anxiety, grabbed her by the head and gently ran his palm over her face, then touched the skin around her eyes with his fingertips and carefully examined it for any changes or damage. Goldie watched the boy's efforts and said indifferently that trying to remove the eyes was pointless because magic circles were carved not only on the eyes, but also on vital organs, spreading through the victim's body like a network of shadow threads. She added coldly that she would be truly sorry if his careless actions needlessly harmed the girl, and her warning sounded like a threat that made him pause and think about the consequences. The young man wanted to know why she let them go, since the lie about the book had been revealed. Calmly, Goldie said she knew that even if they became friends, she could not change his talents or inclinations, so she planned a different approach to win over time by using strategic advantages. Dahlia should not be blamed, she said, because her affection for him and constant presence were part of a deliberate plan. The young man frowned as he realized the enemy could use charm magic. Goldie said the events had taught her a lot about Paracelsus, and although she was curious about the boy's second ability, she held back and moved on to the next stage of the plan. The girl affectionately called the young man a good-natured hero, noted he hoped to resolve all conflicts peacefully, and he agreed. Then she said she was happy their opinions matched. Goldie said she had a request. She asked him to lend his ability for at least an hour, which would be enough. After that, she would explain her situation, and he could decide what to do next. The young man agreed, hoping her intentions were honest. The enemy told the young man to come to the cathedral, where she would wait for him. Paracelsus thought it would have been simpler and more effective if she had said what she wanted from the start. Dahlia stood with her head lowered, quietly saying words of forgiveness, blaming herself for following her mentor and thinking she had only caused needless trouble. Tears ran down her cheeks, staining her innocent face with shame and remorse. Confidently, the man said there was nothing to fear and suggested they return to the cathedral first, and the student agreed. Goldie realized Dahlia's charm made her a more valuable hostage and hoped Paracelsus would hand over the recipe himself, saying that once he had it, Dark Knight could do whatever he wanted with it. The boys kept going but were utterly exhausted, and walking without sleep had become unbearable, so they paused the forced march briefly to take a short rest. The mentor created 2 slimes as security and asked Dahlia to draw magic circles so they would be protected in case of an emergency. Since the contract did not require an immediate arrival, it was better to rest and recover. Dahlia noticed he seemed to like slimes. Waste Eater Slime. This slime eats human waste and cleans the body more thoroughly than a bath. It usually lives in Paracelsus's intestines. Deciding to look after his student's hygiene, the young man gave her a small helper and said hygiene matters because a clean body supports the health and well-being of the soul. Dahlia agreed. Very ticklish, the girl asked the slug to stop and not clean her. Paracelsus asked what kind of creature it was. Dahlia replied it was a rune finder that appears in places appropriate to the types of nearby magic circles. She can locate magic circles and identify their types by channeling magical power through different parts of her body. Dahlia explained she has 2 magic circles behind her eyes and 3 in her stomach that send location and sound information to the caster. Paracelsus was surprised there was nothing dangerous in the circle's structure and asked whether any of them could explode. And the girl replied she would have died long ago if that were true, because she channels magic through her body every day without even realizing it. She said she had worked it out a bit. By applying the magic formula through the skin, you can tune the magic circles to transmit only a vague sense of location and garbled speech. One thing still remains. Dahlia figured her presence would only be a nuisance, so she asked to go with him. Paris replied that, of course, the girl should stay with him because separation was dangerous, and if she were kidnapped, locked somewhere unknown and tortured by magic circles, he could not bear it. He didn't want to give Goldie another trump card, so it was better to keep her close. Dahlia understood his reasoning. Hearing words of approval gave the child real joy. Dahlia added that after finishing the drawing, she would like to get some sleep, and Paracelsus asked her to let him know right away if she needed help. Even if they strayed slightly off course, he knew they would still reach the cathedral within 24 hours. Whatever happened, the young man believed everything would end there. He felt it was time to use the potion. A top-quality luck potion is absorbed when sipped, lasts 24 hours from the first sip, and has a cap, so larger sips do not increase its effect, and the best approach is small sips once a day. Paracelsus believed the potion could be split into 6 doses to lower the cost. Regular use causes resistance to the potion's luck effects and makes a person unlucky. Ideally, the potion should be used no more than once a month. He also realized they had no reliable plan and could only rely on luck. Believing it would give him strength, the mentor asked Dahlia to drink some too, and she agreed. He told her a bed had been prepared for her on the top floor, and that he would be staying in the next room. She thanked him, but wanted to go to bed with him. Stepping onto the observation deck, the man saw St. Herman's mansion. The mirror image confused him at first, but the mansion still exists in this world. The young man entered Dahlia's room, said good morning, and told her they had to prepare a few things before visiting the cathedral, so they'd have to take a short detour. Paracelsus pointed out that inside the area where they could move freely, there was an alchemist's mansion, and suggested they make use of it. The girl asked if it was his friend's house. The young man said it was his teacher's mansion. His teacher had lived a long life among alchemists and was known as the immortal St. Herman. The student noticed the teacher frown slightly when the name was mentioned. Knowing they had to get there in 2 hours, he figured there might be a powerful alchemical item or material he could turn into something useful, and the boy set off. The young man also knew that zombies were spaced evenly. When zombies chase people or people kill zombies, their formation falls apart, and he assumed that breaking it would show whether people were nearby. Paracelsus suddenly noticed something was wrong. The zombie formation had broken, and he asked whether anyone else was in that direction. The young man pushed open the nearest building's door and found Sylvia inside, surprised to see them. Relieved they were alive, the knight asked Dahlia to help her with magic. Dahlia ran quickly to her. Sylvia thanked the girl warmly and sighed with relief, feeling she had escaped a tragic fate. But the happiness did not last. Sylvia said the Dark Knight was a real beast, extremely strong and a master of the sword. He was head and shoulders above her, but losing to him gave her great satisfaction and pleasure. Realizing they would have to face the Dark Knight, the girl asked for another chance, insisting on a fair one-on-one fight. Paracelsus told her everything about the situation, and Sylvia realized Goldie was behind it all, and that they were all copies, which was hard to believe, but everything fit together, and she knew almost nothing about the world outside this place. The knight thanked Dahlia for her help and asked the boys to do their best. They asked if she would go with them. Sylvia assumed they planned to stay somewhere and apologized that she could not join. The girl asked him not to regret it later. Paracelsus said it was time for them to go, and she agreed. St. Herman's mansion had 2 alchemical workshops. The master worked in the first while his apprentice worked in the second, and known for his secrecy, he guarded his recipes closely, fearing they would be stolen. Seeing nothing special in the second workshop, Paracelsus decided to inspect the first. Dahlia believed students should receive knowledge from the teacher, and sadly noted that even looking at his workplace was forbidden. The man said he revealed nothing to them, that their task was to seek the truth in all things, that he needed workers, and that he would not teach. The young man could not imagine what anyone would steal from a hermit in a locked workshop, and after apologizing to the teacher for entering, he saw an old but fully equipped room. Paracelsus began searching for something useful, and warned there might be traps here. Dahlia turned to him. Magic circles on the wall were revealed to him. He realized it hid a secret safe visible only to those with permission. It looked like a mistake had mirrored and deactivated the protections, so they were lucky. 3 keyholes were on the circle. The teacher did not want anyone to see that. Paracelsus turned to Selena and realized he was very lucky. The named slime grew smarter and enjoyed solving puzzles when communicating. It could solve even the hardest problems. The young man was glad his friend had already opened and taken out the research notes. Though he felt awkward, he decided to read them. Dolly noted that the book had no reflection. The young man assumed it had originally been mirrored. They decided to look for methods like the sealing forbidden magic. He then read that staying up late harms concentration and that one should go to bed before 10 o'clock. Eat a balanced mix of vegetables, meat, and grain. Do not overeat. Include many different vegetables because they are good for the body. The young man read this and assumed it was general health advice. Dahlia asked whether following those rules could make someone live that long. Paracelsus said rumors claimed her men had created a living water for immortality, but he thought it unlikely that following that advice would secure 200 years. He remembered what he had been told. The boy only wanted to learn more recipes, but if you just learn the method and repeat it, even a dog can do it, so the teacher told him to seek the deeper truth. The old man said there are no shortcuts, only painstaking repetition of the basics, invisible to the eye. Experience slowly builds and brings you closer to the truth hidden in everything. He asked Paracelsus to do routine work for him. The young man remembered his mentor saying that refusing to share his knowledge would make him fail the Alchemist exam. The teacher didn't care and only gave routine tasks that benefited him. His face twisted and Dahlia noticed the new wrinkles. He decided he needed to find something like living water or another remedy. Paracelsus found nothing. The teacher carried out many studies to find a way to rejuvenate but still found nothing. Remembering that St. Herman had found many side items while searching for the living water, he thought something useful must have been preserved. The young man found part of the philosopher's stone recipe, and then another discovery struck him. He discovered a liquid that dissolves everything into primordial matter, a universal solvent from the southeast, and with it they will be able to cure cocoa. Dahlia, surprised, asked if anything there was useful. Paracelsus said yes, but it did not apply to their situation. Before he could finish, the tap of an old cane echoed in the room. The Exiled man asked the guy if this was really okay with him. St. Herman didn't know what tricks he was using and lacked the skills to pass the exam. He wondered why the flower had that color and insisted that studying and understanding a part of the world's truth would benefit humanity. That is what alchemy is. The teacher did not oppose focusing only on results, but this was not magic. No matter what anyone said, he refused to admit it. Saint Herman ordered them to leave at once and never come before him again, and after addressing the false explorer, he left the young man and the girl alone. Paracelsus threw the book into the furnace. Dahlia asked why he was burning it. Paracelsus said he wanted to discover and make what he needed himself. The mentor handed her clothes from the mansion and asked whether his companion liked them. She said she liked them very much. The man said the clothes are fire-resistant, and if a zombie bites, it will hurt, but the clothes will hold. Her spells will be less noticeable, and if anything happens, have her put on a hood and keep her gloves on until it's over. Paracelsus pulled a heavy telescopic baton from the armory. It might be useful if the negotiations failed, though he was not sure it would. Dea hoped everything would go smoothly, and the mentor told her many hard decisions lay ahead, so he urged her to start thinking through different possible scenarios now. If he has to fight Goldie, he will, even if it might kill him. Until then, he wants the girl to decide whose side she is on. Dea understood and kept explaining to him the magic circle inside her body. It was not dangerous on its own, but it seemed designed with the possibility of her being taken hostage in mind. She could not give any details. The girl went on, saying that if she were taken hostage, she wanted to be left alone because she had many questions, did not know how long she had been here, did not know which memories were real or when she would die, and had spent her whole life in a fog, understanding nothing. Learning she was a replica brought Dahlia huge relief once it turned out to be just a fake. No longer willing to stay, she begged Paracelsus to let her die if she could not get out.